Hey guys, tonight we are drifting back, way back, to the sun-drenched banks of the Nile to explore the surprisingly deep and dark secrets of ancient Egyptian eyeliner. Imagine, for a moment, you're standing there. The desert wind, which isn't nearly as romantic as it sounds, is gently sandblasting your face, and the sun is beating down with an intensity that makes modern tanning beds look like a gentle hug. Honestly, with the lack of modern amenities, the local wildlife that considered humans a snack, and the somewhat experimental medical practices, you probably wouldn't survive a week in ancient Egypt, much less have time to perfect your eyeliner game. But the Egyptians, they thrived, and they did it with style. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps the channel more than you know. And while you're at it, why not type your current location and local time in the comments below? It's always fascinating to see where everyone is drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the bustling sounds of your own world begin to fade, allow your mind's eye to slowly adjust to a different light, a different air. You feel the dry heat bake your skin, a warmth that seems to radiate from the very stones beneath your feet. There's the fine sand, an almost constant companion in this land that gets absolutely everywhere. A persistent, gentle grittiness between your toes, in the folds of your clothes, a soft whisper against your skin. Overhead, the sky is a vast, often cloudless expanse of the deepest blue, and the sun, a powerful, ever-present deity in its own right, casts sharp shadows and bathes the landscape in a brilliant, almost overwhelming golden light. Now, look around you in this ancient imagining. It's not just the statuesque queen with her elaborate headdress, or the powerful pharaoh, semi-divine, whose eyes arrest your attention from across a grand temple courtyard. No, it's the farmer, knee-deep in the fertile black mud brought by the Nile's annual flood, his back bent under the Egyptian sun. It's the artisan, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously chips away at a hieroglyph destined for a tomb wall, the tiny fragments of stone dusting her dark hair. It's the priest, his shaven head gleaming, as he prepares for a sacred ritual within the cool, incense-filled darkness of a sanctuary. It's even the children, their laughter echoing as they chase stray dogs or each other through the dusty, narrow lanes of a bustling village. Their eyes, all of them, are defined by that distinctive dark outline. This shared feature, this common thread, cuts across the entire social fabric of ancient Egypt. Sometimes it's a simple, elegant line, extending subtly from the corner of the eye, almost like a natural shadow, but too precise, too deliberate for nature alone. Other times it's a bold, dramatic sweep, an almost architectural statement that elongates the eye, transforming its shape to mimic the revered falcon, the Eye of Horus, giving it an almond contour that feels both intensely human and mysteriously feline, perhaps even a little divine. This isn't just a casual smudge of charcoal dug from last night's fire. This is coal, a carefully prepared cosmetic, a substance that was fundamental to Egyptian life, as intrinsic to their identity, as the Nile itself was to their very survival. Forget your 15-step modern skincare routine, or that complicated no-makeup look that takes an hour to achieve. These folks had their priorities remarkably straight: appease the sun god, make sure your eyeliner is on point, and maybe, just maybe, find some decent bread that doesn't have too much sand in it. And as you drift deeper into this ancient world, allowing the gentle cadence of this story to guide you, you begin to sense that this kohl, this ubiquitous dark lining, is so much more than just a fashion statement, more than a simple cosmetic choice. There's a gravity to it, a palpable sense of purpose that whispers from beneath the surface of its dark, alluring sheen. It speaks of protection, of power, of piety, and of a profound connection to the world around them and the worlds beyond. Indeed, kohl was one of the most characteristic features of ancient Egyptian culture, a practice that endured for millennia. We know that its use was incredibly widespread. It wasn't confined to the rich or the royal, nor was it exclusive to women, as makeup often became in later cultures. Men, women, and children, from the poorest peasant toiling in the fields to the wealthiest noble lounging in a shaded villa, all participated in this daily ritual. Archaeological evidence from the pre-dynastic period, well before the famous pharaohs and pyramids, shows that the Egyptians were already adorning their eyes, a tradition that would continue, evolving in style but never fading in importance, right through the Roman period and beyond. It's quite fascinating to consider the sheer ubiquity. Some of the earliest coal applicators discovered were surprisingly simple tools, perhaps little more than a smoothed stick of wood, ivory, or bone. Yet, with these humble instruments, they achieved such iconic and enduring looks. The vast quantities of coal pots found in tombs and settlement sites also tell a story. These weren't just rare, precious items brought out for special occasions, they were everyday essentials. You might think of it as their version of ancient toothpaste or soap, a daily necessity. But for your eyes, and undeniably far more glamorous and spiritually significant, imagine little cosmetic kits. Perhaps a small bag holding a coal pot, an applicator, maybe a little mirror of polished bronze. Essentials for anyone wanting to face the day, or the afterlife, properly. Historians still argue whether the initial widespread adoption of coal was primarily driven by its undeniable effectiveness as a practical shield against the sun's fierce glare and the ever-present desert dust and flies. Its perceived magical protective qualities against unseen evils, or if the aesthetic appeal, the way it made the eyes appear larger, more vibrant, more captivating, was the first spark. Of course, it's highly probable, and indeed widely accepted, that all these aspects quickly became intertwined, like the intricate threads of a finely woven linen garment or a well-braided royal wig, each strand inseparable from the others, creating a practice rich in multifaceted meaning. Tonight, we're going to gently peel back these layers, much like an archaeologist might carefully brush away the accumulated sands of millennia from a newly discovered artifact. Or perhaps more relatably for some of you, like the surprisingly difficult process of trying to remove stubborn waterproof mascara after a very long night. Only, let's aim for this to be much, much slower and infinitely more relaxing. We'll explore the ingredients, the laborious craftsmanship, the diverse styles, and the profound beliefs that turned simple minerals into such a potent cultural symbol. They didn't just put on eyeliner as a finishing touch, they adorned themselves with it. They protected themselves with it. They expressed their identity, their status, their connection to the divine with it. It was an act imbued with a significance that's easy for us to overlook from our modern vantage point, where eyeliner, for many, is often just eyeliner. For the ancient Egyptians, it was a declaration, a shield, and a prayer, all drawn in a single, dark, deliberate line. You can almost hear an ancient Egyptian teenager, if you'll permit a little temporal displacement, sighing dramatically. Ugh, Father, you're not seriously going out with your eyeliner that thin? Are you? Have some respect for Ra, please. It was serious business. Let the image of those ancient eyes, so strikingly defined against the backdrop of golden desert sands and skies the color of lapis lazuli, settle gently in your mind. It's a sight that has captivated artists, historians, and dreamers for millennia. And tonight, it's our gentle entry point into a world that is, in many ways, so profoundly alien to our own, and yet, in its deeply human concerns with beauty, with health, with protection, and with the mysteries of existence. So surprisingly, reassuringly familiar. Allow yourself to wonder about the hands that so carefully mix the coal each morning, the thoughts behind the eyes that wore it with such unwavering conviction, the countless stories those meticulously drawn lines could tell, if only they could whisper them across the ages. For now, they just gaze out from the past, still and silent, inviting us to look closer, to understand more, to simply be with them for a little while as we begin our journey. So, as we peer closer at those captivating ancient eyes, almost feeling the gaze from millennia away, let's begin with the very substance that gave them such dramatic definition, the foundation of that iconic look, the kohl itself. And for the most common, the deepest black, the classic Egyptian eyeliner that has etched itself into our historical imagination, we must first talk about a rather special kind of rock, a mineral that held both beauty and power in its crystalline heart. This mineral is called galena. Imagine, if you will, that you're holding a piece of raw galena in your palm. The first thing you might notice is its surprising weight. It's quite heavy for its size, dense and substantial. It would feel cool to the touch, a little piece of the Earth's deep strata. As you turn it over in your fingers, you'd see its distinct metallic gleam, a sort of dark, silvery luster. Not shiny like a polished mirror, but more like a captured moonbeam on a dark night. Galena often breaks into these fascinating, almost perfect cubic crystals, or sometimes into octahedral shapes, like tiny, perfectly formed building blocks crafted by some unseen, meticulous hand in a mysterious subterranean workshop. This isn't just any old dark stone you might stub your toe on. This is lead sulfide, or PBS. If you remember your high school chemistry, though I promise there won't be a test, it's a mineral with a very specific character, a personality all its own, and the ancient Egyptians knew it was special. Now, the ancient Egyptians didn't just conveniently find piles of ready-to-use galena lying around the Nile Delta, like some sort of divine cosmetic delivery service. Oh no, they had to go to considerable effort to obtain it. Archaeologists have pinpointed several sources, with significant mining operations taking place in the eastern desert, near the Red Sea coast, at sites like Gebel el Zayt, and also across the sea in the Sinai Peninsula. Picture those mining expeditions for a moment, scores of workers, perhaps soldiers, perhaps conscripted laborers, toiling under that relentless, unforgiving Egyptian sun. You can almost hear the rhythmic chipping and scraping as they worked at rock faces, searching for those telltale veins of gleaming, dark mineral, then painstakingly extracting it. It was hot, arduous, thirsty work, a true testament to how valuable this substance was. It wasn't exactly like clicking Add to Cart on ancient Amazon Prime for your premium makeup ingredients. This required sweat, grit, and a whole lot of organization. One can only imagine the procurement officer sighing as another order for more shiny black rock landed on his papyrus scroll. So, why all this fuss for this particular rock? What made galena the star ingredient? Well, when galena is ground down, it produces a wonderfully dense, dark gray to an intensely satisfying black powder. This rich pigmentation was, of course, paramount for achieving that deep, defined line they so favored. Furthermore, galena is relatively soft for a mineral, meaning it could be pulverized into a fine powder without requiring superhuman effort or overly complex tools, though, as we'll see, the process was still one of great care and precision. And that metallic quality we talked about, that often translated into a subtle, alluring shimmer in the final kohl product, a little touch of ancient glamour that could catch the light, making the eyes seem even more vibrant, alive, and captivating. Think of it as the original mineral makeup, but with a solid 5,000-year head start on the current trend, and considerably more gravitas. No talc or bismuth oxychloride here, just pure, unadulterated rock power. The widespread use of galena as the primary ingredient for their black kohl is a well-documented mainstream historical fact, confirmed time and again through the chemical analysis of surviving cosmetic samples. These samples, carefully scraped from ancient kohl pots and applicators found in tombs spanning thousands of years of Egyptian history, consistently reveal galena as the star player. This enduring popularity is a testament to its effectiveness, its aesthetic appeal, and likely its perceived additional benefits across countless dynasties. Now, for a quirky little tidbit that adds a touch of human connection across the vast expanse of time. It's quite charming. In a very characteristically ancient Egyptian way, that sometimes archaeologists find not just pots of finished coal carefully placed in tombs, but also actual raw, unprocessed lumps of galena. You might also find bags of galena powder. One can only speculate why. Perhaps it was a sort of DIY kit for the afterlife, ensuring that the deceased could continue to prepare their coal and maintain their impeccable eyeliner game even when communing with Osiris in the field of reeds. Or maybe it was simply a display of wealth and preparedness, like packing extra essentials. I'm so important. I'm taking my raw cosmetic ingredients with me into eternity. It certainly shows how deeply ingrained and valued this substance was. As we delve into the components of coal, it's important to address the elephant in the room, or perhaps the lead in the eyeliner. The term lead sulfide naturally makes modern ears perk up with a degree of caution, and rightly so, given our current understanding of lead's potential health effects. Scholars continue to explore the extent to which ancient Egyptians understood the potential long-term effects of lead-based cosmetics, though its immediate protective, antimicrobial, and aesthetic benefits were clearly prized and actively sought. Their world was one where life expectancy was generally shorter, and immediate threats like infections, sun-related ailments, or even just a grain of sand in the eye causing serious problems were far more pressing daily concerns. They observed that lead-based compounds, including those in galena, had certain beneficial properties. The coal felt cooling when applied. It helped deflect the sun's glare and, as we'll explore more later, they believed it helped prevent and even treat eye infections. Their understanding and experience of these materials were framed by their environment and their medical knowledge, which, while sophisticated for its time, was very different from ours. The journey of galena from a rugged mineral vein to a delicate line gracing an Egyptian eye was one of patience and skill. This wasn't a crude, crush it and hope for the best situation. The galena had to be carefully selected for quality, perhaps cleaned of impurities, and then painstakingly ground. We'll get more into that meticulous grinding process a bit later. But for now, just allow yourself to imagine the dedication, the focused effort required to transform this hard, crystalline mineral into a powder so fine, so smooth, that it could be comfortably applied to the delicate skin around the eyes. There's almost something alchemical about this entire process. Isn't there, taking this dark, heavy, somewhat unassuming stone from deep within the earth, and through human ingenuity and sustained effort, transforming it into something that not only enhanced beauty but was also believed to offer tangible protection and connect the wearer to the divine? It's a little piece of the earth's deep mystery, carefully refined and purposefully repurposed. The Egyptians were true masters of this kind of transformation, consistently seeing the sacred in the seemingly mundane, the potent in the practical. So, this galena wasn't just an inert pigment for them. It was, in many ways, the very soul of their black coal. It was weighty. It was mysterious. It possessed that subtle, captivating sparkle, and it came directly from the embrace of the earth, imbued with all the perceived powers and protective properties of the ground from which it was so laboriously wrested. You can almost picture an ancient Egyptian cosmetic artisan, a sort of proto-chemist or perhaps a revered craftsman, holding a particularly fine chunk of galena up to the flickering lamplight, admiring its dark facets, already envisioning the potent, protective black powder it would soon become. They probably didn't exclaim, "Aha, lead 2 sulfide, precisely what the gods ordered." But they certainly knew, with a deep, instinctual understanding passed down through generations, that they held something remarkably special, something powerful. Perhaps they just grunted approvingly and thought, "Yes, this will make my eyes look absolutely fabulous while I'm supervising the construction of that new obelisk for Pharaoh." And they wouldn't have been wrong. Now, while galena gave the ancient Egyptians that classic, intense, dramatic black line, the signature look we so often associate with them, casting those deep, mysterious shadows that speak of eternity, Their cosmetic palette for eye adornment wasn't entirely monochromatic. They weren't limited to the somber chic of black, however powerful it might have been. They had other options, other vibrant avenues to bring color, and indeed even more layers of meaning horned to their gaze. And one of the most striking of these alternatives, a true splash of life against the muted tones of the desert, was a vibrant, almost pulsating green, derived from another fascinating mineral malachite. Picture this. If you will, you're wandering through an ancient Egyptian market, or perhaps observing a craftsman at his bench. Your eye is suddenly caught by a flash of brilliant color. Unlike the dark, heavy, introspective mystery of galena, malachite explodes with an almost joyful vibrancy. It boasts a spectacular range of green shades, from the palest, most delicate celadon or seafoam green, like the first tender shoots of spring, to the deepest, richest emerald or forest green, reminiscent of lush jungle foliage. Very often, these different shades of green swirl and flow together within a single piece of malachite, creating beautiful, hypnotic banded patterns. These aren't just flat, uniform colors, they are intricate landscapes captured within a stone, like looking down from a great height onto a miniature mineralized world of rolling green hills and valleys. This captivating stone is a copper carbonate hydroxide mineral, and in its raw form, it's a real showstopper, a testament to nature's artistry. And just like its darker cousin, galena, malachite wasn't something you just conveniently find lying around on the fertile banks of the Nile, ready to be scooped up. The ancient Egyptians sourced it, often from the same challenging regions where they mined for copper ores, places like the Sinai Peninsula or the Eastern Desert. Sometimes, a happy geological coincidence meant that deposits of malachite were found in proximity to those of galena. Imagine the miners, perhaps weary from their search for copper or lead, and then their eyes lighting up, metaphorically speaking. Of course, before they applied their actual eye paint, when they came across these vivid green seams or nodules of malachite, it must have felt like unearthing a hidden jewel, a burst of unexpected beauty from the stubborn rock. No wonder other ancient cultures, perhaps less blessed with such mineral resources, might have been, if you'll forgive the pun, quite literally green with envy at Egypt's access to such stunningly vibrant natural pigments. The use of this green eye paint, often referred to by the ancient Egyptian word waju, which itself means green, or to be green, flourishing, was particularly prominent in the earlier periods of Egyptian history. We see a great deal of evidence for it in the pre-dynastic period, before the unification of Egypt, and in the early dynastic times, though its use certainly continued into later periods as well, sometimes alongside, sometimes in preference to, black coal. It's worth noting that it wasn't always prepared or perhaps even referred to as coal in the exact same way as the galena-based cosmetic. It was green eye paint. The base, the consistency, and perhaps even the primary function might have differed at times. But the crucial question is why green in a land like Egypt, where the vast sun-scorched expanse of the desert, the Deshret, or Red Land, was a constant, overwhelming presence. The color green, waju, held an incredibly potent and profound symbolism. It was the color of life itself. It directly mirrored the vibrant, life-giving papyrus reeds, the lush grasses, and all the other forms of vegetation that miraculously flourished along the immediate banks of the Nile and in the fertile delta. That precious, narrow ribbon of Kemet, the Black Land, which sustained the entire civilization. Green, therefore, symbolized growth, regeneration, fertility, youth, vitality, and overwhelming joy. It was the color of new beginnings, of springtime after the inundation, of the unwavering promise of a bountiful harvest. When you encounter the Udjat eye, that incredibly powerful and ubiquitous symbol of protection, royal power, and good health, also known as the Eye of Horus, it is very often depicted in green or with green elements. So, for an ancient Egyptian to outline their eyes in green, or to apply green paint to their eyelids, was to do far more than choose a pleasing color. It was to invoke all these powerful, positive forces. It was to literally frame their vision of the world with life, health, and youthful vigor. Indeed, it is a mainstream historical fact that green eye paint, primarily derived from the mineral malachite, was commonly used in ancient Egypt. This practice was especially prevalent during the pre-dynastic and early dynastic periods, roughly from before 3100 BCE to around 2686 BCE. Its application was strongly associated with these profound concepts of rebirth, health, and divine protection, often specifically linked to the youthful god Horus, and sometimes to Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and joy. For a quirky tidbit, consider that the application of this green pigment wasn't always strictly confined to the lash line or eyelid in the way we might imagine modern eyeliner. There's archaeological evidence, as well as numerous artistic depictions on statues, reliefs, and tomb paintings, suggesting that malachite-based paints were sometimes used to create rather stylized green eyebrows, sometimes thick, sometimes arched, painted directly onto the skin where the natural eyebrow might have been shaved. In some instances, broader areas of green cosmetic application are seen on the face, perhaps for specific ceremonial occasions, or as part of a particular ritualistic look. Talk about a bold brow statement. It certainly makes our modern obsession with perfectly sculpted or microbladed eyebrows seem almost timid in comparison. These weren't just brows. These were declarations of vitality. Now, as with many aspects of daily life in a civilization so ancient and complex, archaeologists and Egyptologists sometimes debate whether the application of green eye paint in daily life always carried the full, profound weight of its symbolic associations for every single individual, or if, for some, particularly in later periods or in more secular contexts, it also became a matter of aesthetic preference, regional variation, fashion, or simply the availability of malachite versus galena. Much like someone today might choose a vibrant green eyeshadow, just because they enjoy the color or it matches their outfit, without necessarily pondering its deeper symbolic roots. It's likely a blend of both, as culture often evolves. So, did an ancient Egyptian have to choose definitively between Team Black and Team Green when facing their cosmetic pot each morning? Not necessarily. The two could coexist, much like your everyday sensible work shoes and your dazzling party heels. Sometimes malachite was more popular in earlier periods, with galena gaining more prominence later. In other instances, they might have been used together. You might see artistic depictions where broad areas of soft green paint are applied to the entire eyelid as a base, perhaps with a sharper, more defined black line from galena applied closer to the lashes to add intensity. Or green might have been favored for certain festivals related to harvest or renewal, or by specific groups of people. It wasn't always an either-or situation. The Egyptian cosmetic kit could be surprisingly versatile. It's like having both your subtle daytime eyeliner and your bold, look-at-me special occasion glitter liner. The ancient Egyptians clearly knew how to accessorize, not just for life, but for the afterlife too. They were prepared for any cosmetic eventuality the duat might throw at them. The careful preparation of malachite for cosmetic use would have mirrored, in principle at least, that of galena, the careful selection of the best quality raw mineral. Possibly some form of cleaning or purification, followed by a meticulous, laborious process of crushing and grinding. Turning those beautiful, often quite hard, distinctively banded stones into a powder fine enough and smooth enough for the delicate eye area required immense patience and the right tools. A subject we'll delve into much more deeply very soon. It's quite something to reflect upon, isn't it, when we, in our modern world, choose to use green eyeshadows or eyeliners? It's generally for fashion, for a pop of color, for fun, perhaps to match an outfit or express a fleeting mood. For the ancient Egyptians, applying green waju to their eyes was akin to painting on a prayer for life itself, a wish for health, a plea for the joyful continuation of existence. It was a deeply optimistic and spiritually powerful act. It certainly lends a whole new, key ancient meaning to the modern concept of going green with your makeup routine. Though, if you were to show up to an ancient Egyptian banquet sporting some of our modern neon or glow in the dark green eyeliner, they might genuinely suspect you'd been consorting with rather advanced beings from far beyond the duat, or perhaps just had access to some truly terrifying and probably highly unstable mineralogy. They liked their green vibrant, but also reassuringly natural. So, the next time you encounter a vibrant piece of malachite jewelry, perhaps noticing its swirling bands of green, or even when you just see a particularly lush, verdant patch of grass after a spring rain. Let your mind drift back for a moment. Picture those ancient Egyptians, by the banks of their sacred Nile, meticulously grinding this beautiful, life affirming stone, connecting themselves quite literally to the very life force of their world, and framing their view of everything around them with palpable hope and vibrant vitality. The dark, dramatic line of Galena coal told one compelling story of mystery and protection, but the vibrant, joyful green of malachite whispered another, equally important tale of their colorful, profoundly symbolic, and ever hopeful world. We've admired the raw, earthy beauty of Galena with its dark, metallic gleam, and the vibrant, life affirming splendor of malachite, bursting with its rich greens. These were undoubtedly precious gifts from the earth, carefully sought and highly valued. But a stunning rock nestled in your palm is one thing. A usable, effective cosmetic that can be delicately applied to the eye is quite another. You couldn't just take that weighty lump of shimmering galena or that beautifully banded piece of malachite and attempt to swipe it directly across your eyelid. Well, you could try. I suppose if you were feeling particularly adventurous and had a high tolerance for discomfort, but it would likely be a rather scratchy, uncomfortable, and frankly, ineffective beauty disaster. No. The ancient Egyptians, with their characteristic ingenuity and pursuit of refinement, were far more sophisticated than that. The next crucial, and often daily, step in this ancient cosmetic ritual was the transformation, the careful, patient, and quite laborious process of the daily grind. Central to this transformative process was an object you've almost certainly seen if you've ever wandered through the Egyptian exhibits of a museum, the cosmetic palette. Now, when we hear palette, we might picture an artist's wooden tray, dotted with colorful dabs of oil paint. But these ancient Egyptian palettes were different. They were typically flat, or sometimes slightly concave. Slabs of stone. The most commonly used material was a fine-grained, smooth stone like slate, or, to be more precise for the geologically inclined among you, siltstone or gray waka. Imagine a small, often beautifully crafted stone tablet, cool and smooth to the touch. In the earlier periods of Egyptian history, particularly the pre-dynastic and early dynastic eras, these palettes could be wonderfully decorative, often carved into the shapes of animals, fish, turtles, birds, or even powerful hippopotami, all creatures intrinsically connected to the Nile and its life-giving symbolism. Later on, particularly in the Middle and New Kingdoms, the palettes often became simpler in form, more utilitarian rectangles or ovals, but their fundamental function remained unchanged to provide the perfect, durable surface for the meticulous grinding of minerals. Paired with the palette was a smaller handstone, a grinder or pestle, also typically fashioned from a suitably hard and smooth stone. This was the tool that did the real work. Held firmly in the hand, its weight and shape designed for the task of crushing, pulverizing, and refining the raw cosmetic ingredients. So, let's picture an ancient Egyptian, perhaps a woman in the relative quiet of her home as the morning sun begins to warm the mud brick walls, or maybe a dedicated servant in a wealthier household, tasked with preparing the cosmetics for the family. She would take a small piece of the chosen mineral, that dark, dense galena for the classic black coal, or the vibrant green malachite for waju, and place it carefully onto the surface of her stone palette. Then, with the handstone, the grinding would begin. It was a rhythmic, repetitive motion, perhaps back and forth, or sometimes in a circular pattern, depending on the shape of the palette and the preference of the grinder. You can almost hear it now if you listen closely with your mind's ear, a soft, persistent grating sound, stone against stone. A meditative sort of percussion that might have been a familiar backdrop to daily life in many an Egyptian household. This was not a quick job. It required patience, persistence, and a good deal of elbow grease, or perhaps, more accurately, wrist grease given the fine motor skills involved. There were certainly no 5-minute makeup tutorials flashing across papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt. The prep work alone for your eyeliner was a genuine commitment, a ritual in itself. The primary goal of this intensive grinding was to reduce the mineral, whether it was galena or malachite, to the finest, most consistent powder possible. This was absolutely crucial for several reasons. If the powder was too coarse, containing even tiny, sharp particles, it would be incredibly irritating to the delicate skin around the eyes. Or worse, could even scratch the cornea, leading to pain and potential infection, precisely the opposite of what some kohl was intended to prevent. A finer powder also adhered much better to the skin and allowed for the creation of a smoother, more elegant, and more precise line. So she would grind and grind and grind, occasionally pausing to assess the texture, perhaps brushing the accumulating powder into a small, natural depression on the palette or into a waiting coal pot or shell. It's a well-established mainstream historical fact that these cosmetic palettes, often fashioned from slate or similar fine-grained stones and clearly used for the grinding of pigments like galena and malachite, are among the most commonly discovered types of artifacts from pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egypt. Their prevalence from such early dates underscores the profound antiquity and the deep-seated importance of cosmetic preparation within their culture, long before the Great Pyramids were even conceived. For a quirky tidbit, some of these ancient palettes are not just functional tools, but true works of art, incredibly ornate and clearly valuable prestige items. We find palettes that were dedicated by kings, such as the famous Narmer palette, though these colossal, elaborately carved examples were almost certainly ceremonial objects, symbolic of royal power and unification, rather than tools for the king's daily eyeliner prep. However, even some of the smaller, more personal palettes discovered in tombs or settlements show incredible craftsmanship. And quite remarkably, the faint residues of ancient pigments, the ghostly traces of black galena or green malachite, sometimes still cling tenaciously to their worn surfaces. Modern scientific analysis of these residues allows researchers today to confirm exactly what minerals were being ground on them thousands of years ago, like a direct powdery message whispered from the past. Given the existence of these highly elaborate ceremonial palettes, Egyptologists continue to discuss whether these grandest, most intricately decorated examples were ever truly used for the practical, daily grind of cosmetics, even by the elite, or if their primary function was more deeply symbolic and ritualistic, perhaps representing the transformative and protective power inherent in the very act of creating and applying these sacred cosmetics themselves. The line between the utilitarian and the sacred was often beautifully blurred in ancient Egypt. Imagine the fine, airy dust that would be produced during this grinding process, especially with the dark, heavy galena, a tiny, localized cloud of shimmering black or gray particles. Without the benefit of modern ventilation systems or a handy Dyson to suck it all up, you'd probably end up with a light, glittery dusting on your hands, your clothes, perhaps even your nose if you weren't particularly careful. You might look a bit like you'd had a minor, and rather glamorous, tussle with a very small, very polite chimney sweep. It brings a new meaning to getting into your work. Sometimes a tiny drop of water, or perhaps a specific oil, might have been added during the very final stages of grinding. Not so much as a primary binder at this point, that's a crucial step we'll explore in detail next, but perhaps to help manage the fine dust and to aid in achieving an even finer, smoother, almost paste-like consistency with certain minerals. Or it might have been ground entirely dry, the powder then carefully collected and stored before being mixed. The specifics could certainly have varied based on tradition, the specific mineral, and the desired final product. Close your eyes for just a moment. and try to fully immerse yourself in this ancient activity. Feel the coolness of the stone palette beneath your supporting hand, the slight but constant resistance as the grinder moves rhythmically across its surface, the almost imperceptible shift as the gritty texture of the mineral gradually yields to a soft, velvety smoothness. Try to smell the faint, earthy, uniquely mineral scent that might arise from the stone and the pigment. It's a focused, almost meditative task, one that connects the individual directly and intimately with the raw materials of their world, transforming them through their own patient effort. This grinding wasn't necessarily seen as just a mindless, tedious chore, like, say, grinding your coffee beans every morning with a very, very slow, somewhat inefficient, and overly complicated ancient hand grinder. But for your face, though, to be fair, a good eyeliner line was probably considered just as essential as a morning pick-me-up. For many, especially given the protective and magical qualities attributed to coal, it was likely a small, personal ritual. It's not at all hard to imagine that the act of preparing it, of bringing forth this potent substance, might have been accompanied by a quiet prayer, a whispered hope, or a softly hummed incantation. Perhaps a heartfelt plea for the coal to guard the wearer's precious sight, to ward off illness, dust, or malevolent influences, or to enhance their beauty and allure in the eyes of both gods and mortals. Something along the lines of, "May this sacred powder, born of stone and effort, protect my vision clear and bright. May it make my eyes shine like the stars in the deepest desert night. May it grant me favor and keep all harm at bay." This is, of course, purely speculative on our part, but it feels wonderfully in keeping with the spirit of their deeply symbolic world. This patient, often laborious grinding was the unseen, humble foundation upon which that striking, iconic Egyptian gaze was built. It was a fundamental act of transformation, turning raw, unyielding stone into a soft, potent, and versatile powder, ready to be imbued with further magic, artistry, and practical purpose. It's a quiet reminder that for the ancient Egyptians, beauty, protection, and even a connection to the divine often began with dedication, patience, and a simple, rhythmic, daily grind. Our ancient Egyptian artisan, through patient and meticulous grinding, now sits before a small, precious mound of incredibly fine, richly colored powder, perhaps the deep, mysterious black of galena that seems to absorb the very light around it, or the vibrant, life-affirming green of malachite, reminiscent of lush papyrus thickets. This silken dust, as beautiful and potent as it might be in its powdered form, isn't quite ready to define those iconic eyes, to bestow that gaze of serene power or playful allure. If you were to try applying this dry powder directly to your eyelid with any real hope of it staying put for more than a fleeting moment, you'd likely find it's a recipe for a quick blink, an errant gust of wind from a nearby fan, or, in their case, perhaps a servant wielding a palm frond, and a rather disappointing cloud of pigmented dust settling everywhere but where you intended. A face full of fallout, rather than fabulousness. No, this precious powder, born of stone and effort, needed a companion. It required a magical elixir of sorts, a carefully chosen medium to transform it from a collection of loose, flighty particles into a smooth, adherent, and gracefully applicable substance. It needed what cosmetic chemists today still rely on: a binder. The ancient Egyptians, with their practical wisdom and keen observation, understood this implicitly. They knew that to make their coal truly effective, truly beautiful, it needed to be coaxed into a more cooperative form. The simplest and most universally available option, then as now, was water. A few carefully measured drops of clean water from a nearby jar could quickly turn the fine coal powder into a temporary paste. It was easy, it was accessible to everyone, and it undoubtedly did the job in a pinch, allowing the pigment to be painted on. However, a purely water-based coal would have its significant drawbacks. It might dry out very quickly upon application, potentially leading to a cracked or flaky appearance. It would offer very little resistance to the natural moisture of the skin, let alone sweat under the fierce Egyptian sun, or tears by whether of joy, sorrow, or perhaps just irritation from a stray grain of desert sand. A sudden splash from the Nile during your morning ablutions, if you were having a particularly clumsy or eventful day, would spell instant cosmetic disaster. So, while water was certainly an option, and likely used, it wasn't always the preferred one, especially if longevity, richness, or a smoother application was desired. For a more luxurious, durable, and often beneficial mixture, the Egyptians frequently turned to the rich world of plant-based oils. Imagine the scene: the coal powder carefully mounded on a pallet. And then, drop by precious drop, a golden oil is introduced, castor oil, derived from the beans of the Ricinus communis plant which grew in Egypt, was known even in antiquity for its thick, viscous nature. This quality would have made it excellent for suspending the heavy mineral particles of galena, and for creating a kohl that would hold its line beautifully. Another highly prized option was oil extracted from the nuts of the moringa tree, sometimes called the ben oil tree. Ben oil is remarkably stable, resistant to rancidity, and has very little scent of its own, making it an ideal, almost neutral, cosmetic base. It was a prized commodity in ancient Egypt. Other vegetable oils, perhaps sesame oil pressed from abundant sesame seeds, or even linseed oil from flax, depending on the specific historical period and regional availability, could also have played a role. These oils wouldn't just act as a simple glue for the pigment. They would lend the kohl a pleasing emollience, a smoothness that helped it glide effortlessly onto the skin without dragging or skipping. They might have added a subtle, attractive sheen to the finish line, enhancing the natural sparkle of the galena or the depth of the malachite. Furthermore, many of these oils could have offered their own moisturizing or soothing properties to the delicate and often exposed skin around the eyes, a welcome bonus in a dry, dusty climate. It's even plausible that some of these cosmetic oils were lightly perfumed with fragrant plant extracts or resins, adding another subtle layer of sensory delight to the daily ritual of adornment, a whisper of myrrh or frankincense accompanying the kohl itself. Beyond the realm of plant oils, animal fats provided another common and eminently practical choice for binding kohl. Goose fat, in particular, was a highly valued commodity in ancient Egypt. Geese were plentiful, both domesticated and hunted, and their fat was used extensively in cooking, as a base for medicinal ointments, and yes, in cosmetics. Ox fat, too, would have been available. These animal fats, when properly rendered, would create a denser, perhaps more water-resistant kohl paste than a simple water mix, and could offer good staying power on the skin. The only slight potential downside, one quietly imagines from our modern, sanitized perspective, is that unless very carefully rendered, purified, and perhaps artfully perfumed, an animal fat-based kohl might have developed a somewhat assertive aroma, especially on a particularly hot day under the Egyptian sun. Hopefully, they had some lovely kai-fi incense smoldering gently nearby to create a more alluring and complex olfactory blend in the air. Darling, is that a new kohl you're wearing? Or did a goose just wander through? Probably not a question an Egyptian noblewoman wanted to hear. And what about beeswax? While perhaps less commonly identified as a primary binder for the everyday creamy kohl paste that seems to have been most prevalent, it's certainly conceivable that small amounts of beeswax could have been incorporated into certain specialized kohl formulations. Beeswax would enhance water resistance and could have been used to create a more solid, perhaps even stick-like kohl, a very distant ancestor of our modern eyeliner pencils and crayons. The Egyptians were certainly masters of apiculture and used honey and beeswax extensively, so it's a plausible ingredient for specific cosmetic recipes. So, let's picture the scene again: our ancient Egyptian individual, with their freshly ground, precious powder neatly piled on the stone pallet, would now carefully, almost reverently, add their chosen binder. Perhaps it's a few drops of lustrous golden moringa oil or a tiny, carefully measured scoop of softened, creamy goose fat. This wasn't a haphazard splash and mix affair, like a child making mud pies, though perhaps just as fun for the coal maker. It was done with precision and care, adding the liquid or fat little by little. Using a slender coal stick, that elegant applicator will meet properly in our next section, to blend and combine the ingredients. The goal was to achieve the perfect consistency, a smooth, rich paste, not too dry and crumbly that it wouldn't adhere, nor too thin and runny that it would bleed and smudge. It had to be, as a certain fairy tale character might have said, just right. Goldilocks, with her discerning palate for porridge, would undoubtedly have made an excellent coal chemist in ancient Thebes. Meticulously adjusting her pigment to binder ratios, it's a mainstream historical fact, supported by extensive chemical analysis of ancient Egyptian coal samples retrieved from tombs and cosmetic pots, that these powdered mineral pigments, such as galena and malachite, were indeed commonly mixed with various binding agents. These analyses have confirmed the presence of vegetable oils like castor oil or moringa oil and various animal fats, transforming the dry powders into usable, effective cosmetic pastes. For a quirky and rather evocative tidbit in some exceptionally well-preserved and undisturbed tombs, coal has been found still nestled in its original, often beautifully crafted pots. The dried residue within sometimes perfectly preserves the delicate imprint of the last coal stick that stirred it, or the faint concentric circles etched into its surface from when it was last mixed. It's a tiny, frozen moment from thousands of years ago, a silent, poignant testament to its final preparation or its owner's intended use in the afterlife. One can easily imagine that particularly effective or pleasing coal recipes, the perfect blend of pigment and binder, perhaps with a secret ingredient or two, might have been closely guarded family secrets, passed down from mother to daughter, from one generation to the next, given the variety of potential ingredients and personal needs. The precise recipes for coal, particularly the exact proportional balance between pigment and binder, and the specific types of binding agents favored, likely varied significantly depending on the historical period, geographical region, an individual's social status, access to resources, and simple personal preference. Scholars continue to meticulously analyze surviving residues using advanced techniques to better understand the nuances of these ancient cosmetic formulations and even their potential, intentionally included therapeutic properties. The choice of binder would, of course, have profoundly affected the final coal product. It directly influenced the texture. Was it a light, creamy fluid that flowed easily? A dense, almost waxy solid that required a bit more pressure? Or a thin, paint-like wash for a softer effect? It dictated the ease of application, determining how smoothly the coal stick would glide across the delicate skin of the eyelid. It also played a huge role in how long the meticulously applied eyeliner would last on the skin, resisting the challenges of smudging, fading, or the Egyptian climate. And, as we've touched upon, some oils might have contributed their own perceived moisturizing, soothing, or even mildly medicinal effects to the overall concoction. It was far more than just acting as mere glue for the glittery rock dust. No long, intimidating list of unpronounceable chemicals, parabens, polymers, or sulfates on the back of their coal pots. Just good, old-fashioned, meticulously ground mineral powder, and whatever oil or fat was deemed best for the task, perhaps with a touch of divine favor invoked during its careful mixing. Simpler times, perhaps, though, as we noted, maybe occasionally resulting in a slightly more organic smelling eyeliner, depending on the chosen fat and the intensity of the desert heat. A small price to pay for beauty and protection, no doubt. This careful blending, this artful, almost alchemical combination of powder and liquid or fat, was the magical moment where raw elements, wrested from the earth and refined by human hands, transformed into a true cosmetic. It was the quiet alchemy of the everyday, turning stone and oil into allure, identity, and a shield against the unseen. Now that our perfectly blended coal paste, that rich, creamy, and potent concoction of mineral powder and soothing oil, or perhaps a touch of nourishing fat, sits waiting expectantly on the stone pallet, or has perhaps already been carefully transferred, and it needs a proper home. This wasn't a substance to be left out casually on a dusty windowsill, exposed to the elements or curious insects. No, this precious coal, imbued with so much significance, needed a vessel befitting its importance, its protective power, and its aesthetic promise. And alongside that specialized container, a very particular tool, a kind of delicate magic wand, was required to transfer its dark or verdant magic from the pot to the person. To trace those iconic lines that would define and empower the Egyptian gaze, these containers, known to us today as coal pots or coal tubes, were far more than just ancient, glorified Tupperware for eye makeup. They were often miniature works of art in themselves, reflecting the Egyptian love for beauty, craftsmanship, and symbolism in even the most personal of items. Imagine holding one, perhaps a slender tube, or maybe a small, elegant jar, meticulously crafted from cool, smooth alabaster, its veined surface sometimes translucent enough to allow a tantalizing hint of the dark coal within to show through. Others were fashioned from steatite, a soft soapstone that was easily carved into intricate shapes, or from beautiful, lustrous ivory, warm and smooth to the touch. But perhaps the most characteristically Egyptian material for these coal pots, and indeed for many small, decorative objects, was faience. This wasn't ordinary pottery as we might think of it. Faience was a brilliant, quartz-based ceramic material, a non-clay substance that could be glazed in stunningly vibrant and durable hues. Bright blues, rich turquoise, and vivid greens being particularly popular. These colors resonated deeply with Egyptian symbolism, blue and turquoise reflecting the life-giving waters of the Nile and the vast expanse of the heavens, and green, as we know, symbolizing life, growth, and regeneration. So your coal pot wasn't just a utilitarian item, it was very much a statement piece for your ancient Egyptian vanity table. If such a dedicated piece of furniture existed in precisely that form, it was an object of beauty to be admired in its own right. These pots and tubes came in a delightful variety of shapes and designs, showcasing the Egyptians' ingenuity and artistic flair. Simple, elegant cylindrical tubes were common, often with a carefully ground flat base for stability and a neatly fitting lid, usually a small disc of the same material, or perhaps wood, designed to keep the precious coal paste clean, to prevent it from drying out too quickly in the arid air, and maybe even to keep out any overly inquisitive ants. Then there were the more complex, multiple tube containers, sometimes double, triple, or even quadruple tubes, all joined together as a single unit. One can easily presume these were designed to hold different types or colors of coal simultaneously. Perhaps black galena-based coal resided in one tube, and vibrant green malachite-based paint in another. Or maybe they held coal of different consistencies, one for a fine line, another for a broader application. Imagine the morning cosmetic dilemma: which coal shall I grace the world with today? A very ancient, yet somehow very chic problem to have. Some coal pots were more figural, charmingly shaped like miniature palm columns, lotus flowers, or even animals. It's not uncommon in museum collections to find coal pots in the endearing form of a squatting monkey, meticulously clutching the tube that would have held the coal, its little face a mask of concentration. Or they might personify the household protector god Bez, with his characteristically fierce tongue-lolling, yet ultimately friendly and apotropaic face. These weren't just whimsical design choices. They likely added an extra layer of symbolic protection or good fortune to the cosmetic ritual itself. The little figures acting as guardians of the potent substance within. And what of the applicators? These sacred wands that were tasked with delivering the coal from pot to eyelid? These were typically slender rods, often referred to by Egyptologists simply as coal sticks. They, too, were crafted from a diverse range of materials, reflecting both practicality and status. Many were likely made of wood, simple, effective, and readily available. Others were fashioned from ivory, its smooth, organic feel pleasant against the skin. For those who could afford a touch more luxury, coal sticks might be fashioned from bronze, which would have felt cool and perhaps even soothing upon application, or even from precious silver later. Particularly during the Roman period in Egypt, glass applicators also became common, sometimes twisted into elegant spiral patterns. One end of the coal stick was usually slightly thickened, rounded, or carefully flattened into a small spatula or spoon-like shape. This was the functional business end, meticulously designed to scoop up a small, manageable amount of the coal paste and then to allow for a relatively controlled and precise application. The other end of the applicator might be plain and unadorned, or it could be decorated with a small carved finial, perhaps a delicate papyrus flower, an Ankh symbol, or even a tiny animal motif, adding a touch of personalized elegance to this essential cosmetic tool. These weren't just disposable Q-tips from a plastic bag. These were cherished, reusable instruments, the ancient equivalent of a very precise, high-end liquid eyeliner brush, but probably imbued with a great deal more personal significance and perhaps even a whisper of divine blessing. So, let's try to envision the intimate moment of application. Our ancient Egyptian, having selected their coal pot for the day, would gently remove the lid. They would then dip the prepared end of their coal stick into the creamy, pigmented paste within. Then, often with the aid of a small mirror, typically a highly polished disc of bronze or silver, as glass mirrors as we know them were a much later invention, reflecting a somewhat dimmer, warmer image, the delicate and skillful process would begin. The coal stick, laden with its precious cargo, would be drawn carefully along the lash lines, both upper and lower. The aim was frequently not just a simple, subtle line to enhance the lashes, but often that characteristic, dramatically elongated almond shape, extending outwards from the corner of the eye towards the temples, sometimes with a subtle, graceful flick upwards, sometimes with a bold, graphic, almost architectural flourish. It undoubtedly required a steady hand, a keen eye for symmetry, and no small amount of dedicated practice. No shaky hands were allowed when you were attempting to channel your inner Nefertiti or achieve the piercing, all-seeing gaze of a god or goddess. One wrong move, a sudden sneeze, or a playful nudge from a nearby cat, and you'd risk going from divinely mysterious and alluring to looking like a startled badger who'd had a run-in with an ink pot in an instant. The horror. It's a mainstream historical fact that ancient Egyptians meticulously stored their coal in these specially designed pots or tubes, frequently made of durable and beautiful materials like stone such as alabaster or steatite, faience, later glass, or ivory, and they just as carefully used these slender applicators, often crafted from wood, bronze, ivory, or stone, to meticulously apply the cosmetic to their eyes with practiced skill. For a quirky and rather endearing tidbit, it's quite charming and a little bit poignant in a way that coal sticks are sometimes discovered by archaeologists still resting snugly inside their original coal pots, as if the owner had just set them down for a fleeting moment and fully intended to return to their beautification ritual. Some of the more whimsical coal pots, like those delightful examples shaped as monkeys diligently holding the tube, or the ever-watchful Bez, seem to suggest a playful, almost affectionate element to this daily cosmetic ritual, even amidst its more serious, protective, medicinal, and religious connotations. While the artistic representations in tombs and on papyri clearly show the desired final look, those perfect iconic lines, the exact technique for achieving the highly stylized, remarkably consistent, and often dramatically elongated coal lines seen in ancient Egyptian art is still a subject of some discussion and experimentation among researchers and historical reenactors. Theories range from the possible use of rudimentary stencils or guides for less skilled individuals or for achieving perfect symmetry, to what is perhaps more likely, an exceptional level of freehand skill developed from a very young age and honed through daily, dedicated practice. Imagine the coolness of a vibrant blue faience pot held in your hand, the smooth, almost buttery feel of a well-worn ivory applicator, the focused intensity of the application process itself. There might be the faint, specific scent of the coal, earthy from the minerals, perhaps subtly sweet or resinous from the oils or any added fragrances. This wasn't just putting on makeup in the modern, often rushed, 5 minutes before you dash out the door sense. For the ancient Egyptians, this daily ritual was very likely a quiet moment of personal transformation, a deliberate act of adorning, empowering, and protecting oneself. It was preparing to face the world with confidence, to engage with the divine with respect, or even to journey into the complex spiritual landscape of the afterlife with one's spiritual eyes wide open, alert, and well defended. It's probably safe to assume there wasn't a lot of casual sharing of coal sticks or pots. Unless you were really close friends or immediate family, eye infections were a known hazard, even with purportedly magic coal. So, a degree of personal cosmetic hygiene, even if not understood in precisely our modern microbiological terms, was likely practiced out of common sense. These coal pots and their accompanying applicators, therefore, were so much more than just simple tools. They were intimate personal possessions, vital instruments of daily ritual, and potent symbols of a sophisticated culture that placed immense and enduring value on the power of the human gaze, and the ancient art of making it both captivatingly beautiful and supernaturally protected. We've journeyed through the meticulous creation of the coal paste, from raw mineral to fine powder, and then into a smooth, applicable cosmetic. We've admired the elegant pots that housed it and the delicate wands that painted it onto the skin, transforming a simple mineral into a line of power and undeniable beauty. But as we've hinted throughout our sleepy exploration, this daily, almost sacred ritual of applying coal to the eyes was about far more than just looking your best for your impending audience with the pharaoh, or ensuring your portrait on the tomb wall was suitably striking for eternity. In the uniquely challenging, sun-drenched, and windswept environment of ancient Egypt, coal played a vital, practical, and often underappreciated role in protecting one of the most precious and vulnerable human senses' sight. Just take a moment, as you drift and relax, to truly picture it, to almost feel it on your skin. You're standing in ancient Egypt, thousands of years ago. The sun here isn't just a gentle, warming presence. For much of the year, it's a blazing, often merciless golden orb that dominates a vast, frequently cloudless azure sky. Its light doesn't just illuminate, it reflects with a blinding, almost painful intensity off the pale, shimmering desert sands that stretch to the horizon, off the dancing surface of the mighty Nile, and even off the whitewashed mud brick walls of homes and temples. Add to this the fine, pervasive desert dust, microscopic particles of sand and earth, whipped up by the slightest breeze or a passing chariot, constantly seeking to invade your eyes, your nose, your very being. And then, of course, there were the flies, persistent, irritating, and unfortunately very efficient carriers of various eye diseases. It was, to put it mildly, an ophthalmologist's ancient nightmare, or perhaps, depending on their business model and available remedies, their lifelong dream job. This is where coal, particularly the dark varieties made from galena, truly shone, quite literally, by not shining, and by helping the wearer to see through the shine of everything else. The dark pigment, when applied in those characteristic thick lines around the eyes, worked in a remarkably similar way to the eye black you see modern athletes, baseball players, football players, smearing beneath their eyes when they compete under bright stadium lights or on a sunny field. The coal absorbed the harsh, incident sunlight, dramatically reducing the amount of glare that would otherwise reflect off the skin around the eyes and into the sensitive pupils. This made it far more comfortable to see clearly in intensely bright conditions, lessening the natural human reaction to squint, which can lead to eye strain and headaches. It was, in essence, like having built-in yet very stylish and profoundly spiritually significant sunglasses. Long before Ray-Ban ever considered setting up a papyrus-fronted emporium near the Giza Plateau, But the relentless sun wasn't the only environmental assailant that coal helped to combat. That fine, ever-present desert dust, those tiny, sharp-edged particles of sand, were a constant menace to eye health. Here again, coal offered a practical line of defense. The oily or fatty base of the coal paste, the very same vehicle that helped it adhere so beautifully to the skin and glide on so smoothly, could also act as a sort of sticky trap. It's believed that this somewhat greasy or moist coal could catch and hold some of those fine, wind-blown particles before they could actually get into the eye itself, thereby preventing irritation, inflammation, and potential abrasion to the delicate cornea. The thick line of coal itself would also form a slight physical barrier, a tiny, protective rampart guarding the vulnerable juncture where the eyelids meet the eyeball. It wouldn't, of course, offer much protection against a full-blown Khamsin sandstorm. For that, you'd probably just hide indoors and pray to Seth to calm down. But for the everyday insidious grit and dust, it was a surprisingly helpful shield. Now, this next point ventures a little more into the realm of well-reasoned speculation, but it's quite an intriguing and plausible one. Flies, as we've mentioned, were a constant buzzing nuisance in ancient Egypt, and more seriously, they were notorious vectors for spreading debilitating eye infections, such as trachoma. Sadly, evidence suggests that trachoma, which can lead to blindness if untreated, was rampant in ancient Egypt. Some researchers and historians have therefore proposed that coal may have also served, perhaps as an unintended but welcome side effect, as a fly repellent. Why might this be? Perhaps the sheer darkness of the coal-lined eyes, creating a less attractive landing zone, was a deterrent to these light-attracted pests? Or maybe, and this is more speculative, certain ingredients sometimes included in the coal mixture beyond the primary mineral pigments like galena and the common binders, perhaps specific aromatic plant extracts or other substances not always detectable today, had inherent insect-repelling properties. While the evidence for coal as a fly-specific repellent isn't as definitive as its anti-glare effect, it remains a compelling idea. Imagine trying to meticulously chisel a complex hieroglyph onto a towering temple wall, or navigate a crowded, bustling marketplace while constantly swatting determined, sticky-footed flies away from your eyes. Coal, in that scenario, wasn't just makeup. It was a potential productivity tool, helping you to see clearly and work without constant, maddening, and unhygienic interruption. It is a mainstream historical fact, widely accepted by scholars and Egyptologists, that the practice of applying dark coal around the eyes by the ancient Egyptians served as a crucial practical measure to reduce the harsh glare of the ever-present desert sun. This action would have protected their vision, enhanced their comfort, and allowed them to function more effectively in Egypt's intensely bright natural environment. For a quirky tidbit that expands this idea of protection and idealized appearance, it wasn't just human beings who benefited from this coal-eyed aesthetic, or its perceived practical and magical protections. In ancient Egyptian art, sacred animals such as revered temple cats, often seen as manifestations of goddesses like Bastet or Sekhmet, or the powerful sacred Apis bulls, were also frequently depicted with stylized, elegantly drawn, coal-lined eyes. This artistic convention could have been to symbolically extend that divine protection and clarity of vision to these important creatures. Or perhaps it simply reflected the Egyptian ideal of beauty, alertness, and divine presence, making these sacred animals appear even more potent, watchful, and godlike in their representations. Now, while the sun-shielding properties of dark coal are generally well accepted due to its basic physical principles of light absorption, the precise extent to which it acted as an effective physical barrier against significant quantities of wind-blown sand in severe conditions, or functioned as a truly significant fly deterrent based solely on its most common, identified ingredients, remains a topic of ongoing discussion and sometimes lively research among Egyptologists, archaeologists, and medical historians. These experts carefully weigh the available artistic evidence, any relevant textual clues from ancient papyri, and the latest scientific analyses of preserved coal residues to build a more complete picture. So, you see, this daily application of coal was far from a mere act of vanity or fleeting fashion. For the ancient Egyptians, it was an integral act of self-preservation, a sensible and ingrained method to navigate and thrive in what could often be a very challenging and unforgiving environment. Protecting one's eyesight was absolutely crucial, not just for personal comfort, but for one's ability to work effectively, to contribute to the family and society, and to fully and safely experience the vibrant world around them. In a land where so much of daily life and livelihood depended on keen observation, spotting game in the desert fringes, navigating the treacherous currents and sandbanks of the Nile, accurately tending to vital crops, or crafting intricate objects with precision, good vision was absolutely paramount. When you really stop and think about it, coal was quite the impressive ancient Egyptian multi-tool for the eyes. So, let's recap. It's a potent sunscreen, a rudimentary dust filter, possibly even a bit of a bug spray. And it makes you look divine, spiritually connected, and utterly captivating your latest, greatest smartphone. With all its apps and advanced technology, can't quite manage all of that comprehensive eye care, and it definitely doesn't run on powdered rock and soothing goose fat. The ancient Egyptians really knew how to get maximum value from their minerals. This practical, protective aspect of coal is truly a vital layer in understanding its profound and enduring importance in ancient Egyptian culture. It wasn't just about how the Egyptians wanted to be seen by others, or even by their gods, but about how they could literally see the world around them more clearly, more comfortably, and more safely, day after day, under that brilliant, beautiful, yet often demanding Egyptian sky. We've seen how coal acted as a trusty, ever-present shield against the relentless Egyptian sun and the equally persistent desert dust, making life under that brilliant sky a little more comfortable and a lot less squinty. But the ancient Egyptians' profound faith in their signature eye adornment didn't simply stop at these practicalities of mere physical protection from the elements. They held a deep-seated, unwavering belief that their coal, this dark and mysterious paste, possessed even more profound and active powers. The power to heal, the ability to soothe, and the magic to ward off the various debilitating ailments that so often plagued their precious eyes. If you were to flip through the papyrus pages of ancient Egyptian medical texts, such as the famous Ebers Papyrus or the Edwin Smith Papyrus, you'd find a rather daunting and descriptive list of eye complaints. They speak of inflammations, of discharges, of whiteness in the eyes, of bloodshot conditions, and of what they termed AII, a general word often translated as blindness or serious sight impairment. These conditions were likely caused by a host of factors, the constant irritation from sand and dust. Bacterial and viral infections often spread by those ubiquitous, disease-carrying flies we mentioned earlier, or simply the general consequences of living in a sandy, sunny clime with limited understanding of microbiology. The eyes were clearly a vulnerable point, a frequent source of suffering, and the Egyptians were understandably keen to find and utilize effective remedies. And coal, it seems, was widely considered a frontline defense and a potent treatment. Its application wasn't just about making your eyes look aesthetically pleasing for the gods or your fellow mortals, nor was it solely about feeling more comfortable in the bright sunlight. For many, it was an active daily ritual aimed at keeping their eyes healthy, or restoring them to health if some unfortunate illness or infection took hold. Now, this is where the story of coal takes a particularly fascinating and somewhat unexpected turn. A point where ancient practice intersects with some rather surprising modern scientific inquiry. For a very long time, the idea of a lead-based cosmetic being genuinely medicinal sounded, to our modern, safety-conscious ears, like a distinct contradiction in terms. We're after all, very well versed in the numerous dangers of lead toxicity. But then, some very clever researchers, notably a team in France led by Philippe Walter, decided to look much closer at the actual chemical composition of ancient coal samples that had been preserved for millennia in tombs. They discovered that in addition to the primary ingredient of galena, which is lead sulfide, these ancient cosmetics often contained other, more complex lead compounds, specifically lead salts like lauryonite leadness 2, chloride hydroxide, and phosgenite lead 2 chloride carbonate. These compounds could have formed naturally over very long periods of storage in the coal pots through interaction with moisture and other substances. Or, and this is quite intriguing, they might have been intentionally, if empirically, synthesized in small amounts during the coal preparation process itself. What this research team then went on to find was truly remarkable. They demonstrated that these specific lead salts, when present in very low concentrations, and we are talking incredibly low, parts per million here, truly tiny, trace amounts, can actually stimulate human skin cells, specifically keratinocytes, to produce significantly more nitric oxide. Why on earth is that important for sleepy eye history? Well, nitric oxide isn't just a gas, it's a crucial signaling molecule in our bodies, and one of its key roles is to rev up the innate immune system. It helps our body's defenses to fight off bacterial infections much more effectively by, among other things, killing bacteria directly or inhibiting their growth. So, the compelling theory that emerged is that these minute quantities of specific lead salts in the ancient coal were essentially giving the wearer's eyes a localized, gentle immune boost, helping to prevent or combat common bacterial eye infections. The ancient Egyptians, and of course, wouldn't have known a thing about nitric oxide, keratinocytes, or cellular immune responses. But they were, as we've established, exceptionally keen observers of their world and their bodies. If they noticed generation after generation that people who regularly use certain types of coal had fewer troublesome eye infections, or that applying a particular coal preparation seemed to help an existing infection clear up faster, they would have naturally and quite logically, from their perspective, attributed potent medicinal power to the coal itself. It's almost as if they stumbled upon a very specific, low-dose biochemical hack for promoting eye health. Millennia before modern science could even begin to formulate the questions, let alone explain the mechanism. Talk about an accidental and incredibly long-running informal clinical trial, with pharaohs and farmers as willing participants. Of course, it's absolutely crucial to state, very clearly, that this isn't an endorsement or encouragement for anyone today to start experimenting with lead-based cosmetics. We now understand unequivocally that chronic exposure to higher levels of lead is definitely harmful and can have severe health consequences. But in the specific context of ancient Egypt, with their different environmental challenges, they're generally shorter lifespans, perhaps different genetic tolerances, and the immediate, often devastating threat posed by acute eye diseases leading to blindness. These small, localized applications of coal containing trace beneficial compounds might have offered a net protective or therapeutic benefit against infections that were a clear and present danger. It's a fascinating case of an ancient remedy potentially having a scientifically plausible basis, even if the original practitioners didn't understand the precise why of its efficacy. Only that it seemed to work. And it probably wasn't just about the lead compounds. As intriguing as that science is, ancient Egyptian coal recipes, particularly those that were specifically intended for medicinal rather than purely cosmetic use, could be quite complex affairs. They might have incorporated other ingredients believed to possess healing properties. The carefully prepared ash of certain plants known for their astringent or drying qualities. Tiny amounts of honey, which we now recognize for its natural antimicrobial properties, used even today in some specialized medical dressings, or various saps and resins from aromatic trees, each chosen for its perceived beneficial effect, a knowledge base passed down through generations of healers, priests, and coal makers. Furthermore, beyond any direct antimicrobial action, the very application of coal, especially if it was made with cooling oils like moringa, or applied with a smooth, cool metallic or stone applicator, could have provided immediate and welcome soothing relief to eyes that were hot, itchy, inflamed, or simply tired from the sun and dust. This sensation of comfort, however temporary, would have powerfully reinforced the belief in coal's overall healing capabilities. If it makes your sore eyes feel better almost instantly, it's easy to believe it is better, right? It is a mainstream historical fact that ancient Egyptians widely used coal not only for its well-known cosmetic and sun protection qualities, but also because they firmly believed in its significant medicinal properties, particularly for preventing and treating the common eye infections that were so prevalent in their society. And as we've seen, some modern scientific research has lent surprising credence to this ancient belief, suggesting that low concentrations of certain lead compounds, potentially formed or intentionally included in ancient coal preparations, could indeed stimulate an immune response effective against bacteria. For a quirky tidbit that underlines this medicinal connection, the Ebers Papyrus, one of our most extensive and valuable ancient Egyptian medical texts, dating to around 1550 BCE, contains numerous detailed prescriptions for a wide variety of eye ailments. Several of these remedies specifically list coal, often specifying whether black or green coal should be used as a key active ingredient. These coal-based prescriptions are sometimes accompanied by instructions for other additives, like water from the sky that has fallen tonight, or milk of a woman who has borne a male child, and even specific incantations or magical spells to be recited during the preparation or application of the remedy, presumably to enhance its therapeutic efficacy. It was medicine and magic, science and spirituality, all beautifully and practically intertwined. Now, the precise balance between the historically perceived and potentially real short-term medicinal benefits of lead-based coal in ancient Egypt, particularly in its role combating rampant and potentially blinding eye infections, and the possible long-term health risks associated with even low-level lead exposure, given their typical lifespans, dietary habits, and overall environmental lead burden, is a complex and nuanced issue that continues to be carefully evaluated and actively debated by toxicologists, archaeologists, and historians of medicine. It's a delicate calculation of risk versus benefit in a very different world. Can you just imagine, for a moment, visiting your local ophthalmologist today, complaining of itchy eyes, and having them peer sagely at you before announcing, "Right, your prescription is 2 daily applications of this rather fetching smoky gray eyeliner, a light dusting of powdered antelope horn for good measure, and be sure to chant the protective hymn to Horus thrice as you apply it. Call me in the morning if you're not seeing into the duat." Different times, different, and perhaps more wonderfully theatrical, prescriptions. Indeed. So, the ancient Egyptians' eyeliner wasn't just sitting there looking pretty or passively blocking the sun's harsh rays. It was, in their belief system and perhaps an actual biochemical fact, an active participant in the wearer's health, a tiny warrior fighting off invisible bacterial invaders that threatened their sight. That's one seriously multitasking cosmetic. It really does make our modern waterproof, smudge-proof, 24-hour wear eyeliners seem a little bit like underachievers in the grand historical scheme of things. Doesn't it? Sure, it lasts all day, but does it boost your nitric oxide levels to fight infection? I think not. This deep-seated belief in coal's healing touch, its power as an active medicinal agent, adds yet another profound and fascinating layer to its already rich story. It elevates coal from a mere cosmetic or a simple sunblock to a vital component of ancient Egyptian healthcare, a trusted and revered ally in the daily, relentless battle to keep their vision clear and their eyes free from disease in a world teeming with microscopic threats they couldn't see, but certainly learned to combat with their own unique ingenuity. We've delved into coal's impressive resume as a practical sun shield, a diligent dust guard, and even, quite remarkably, a potential bacteria buster with some surprising modern science, lending a nod to ancient wisdom. But the ancient Egyptians' reliance on and profound reverence for their signature coal eyeliner didn't end with these tangible worldly benefits. As vital as they were, for them, the protective aura of coal extended far beyond the purely physical realm, ascending into the intricate, often perilous, and deeply significant landscape of magic, spirituality, and supernatural defense. It wasn't just about keeping the grid out, it was about keeping the evil out. 2. One of the most pervasive and deeply rooted beliefs across many ancient cultures, and one that certainly held powerful sway in Egypt, was the terrifying and insidious power of the evil eye. This wasn't just a quaint superstition whispered by the uninformed, it was a genuine and potent fear that influenced daily life and practices. The core idea was that a glance, particularly one filled with envy, malice, jealousy, or even sometimes excessive insincere praise, which could mask underlying resentment, could transmit harmful, negative energy. This malevolent gaze was believed to be capable of causing a wide range of misfortunes for the recipient: sudden illness, inexplicable accidents, loss of property, failure in endeavors, or even, in the most potent cases, death. It was, if you like, the ancient world's version of getting a sudden, overwhelming torrent of nasty, anonymous comments on your meticulously inscribed papyrus feed. You needed some serious spiritual blocking software. And you needed it to be effective, always on, and preferably stylish. And what was one of the most potent, universally recognized forms of this spiritual blocking software? This personal firewall against malevolent intentions. You've likely guessed it by now, our multifaceted friend, kohl. The carefully applied lines of kohl around the eyes were widely believed to be a direct and powerful defense against this dreaded evil eye and other unseen harmful forces. How exactly was it thought to work? Well, as with many magical beliefs, there were likely several intertwined concepts at play, reinforcing each other. Firstly, the dark, sometimes shimmering quality of the kohl itself. Particularly the black galena-based kohl might have been thought to act as a kind of spiritual mirror. The idea was that the intense dark outline could reflect the evil glance and its harmful energy right back to its sender, a sort of return to sender policy for curses. Alternatively, the kohl might have been seen as absorbing and neutralizing the negative energy before it could penetrate and harm the wearer. Furthermore, the application of kohl, by making the wearer's own eyes appear larger, more intense, more defined, and perhaps even more divine or animalistically powerful, like the piercing gaze of a falcon, could have been seen as empowering the wearer's own gaze, making them appear more formidable and therefore less susceptible to another's hostile visual influence. Perhaps most significantly, however, was the very shape of the traditional kohl outline. That iconic, elongated eye, often extending outwards towards the temples, directly mimicked the sacred Ujjat eye, also known as the Eye of Horus. As we've touched upon previously, the Ujjat was one of the most powerful, ubiquitous, and instantly recognizable protective symbols in all of ancient Egypt. It represented healing, restoration, wholeness, royal power, and unwavering, vigilant protection. By meticulously outlining their own mortal eyes to resemble this potent, divine symbol, the ancient Egyptians weren't just aiming for a fashionable or aesthetically pleasing look. They were actively, consciously invoking the immense protective power of the god Horus himself. They were, in a very real sense, placing themselves under his divine guardianship every single morning when they applied their kohl. And when this Ujjat-shaped eyeliner was rendered in green malachite, Waju, the color of life, flourishing, and regeneration, the protective magic was considered by many to be amplified even further, creating a vibrant shield of life-affirming energy. In many ancient belief systems, including those of Egypt, the eyes were considered to be exceptionally powerful and also exceptionally vulnerable. They were often poetically described as windows to the soul, direct conduits through which a person's inner spirit or life force could be perceived by others, and, more alarmingly, through which malevolent spirits, hostile magic, or negative influences could potentially enter and take root. Kohl, in this crucial context, acted as a vital magical sealant, a protective boundary carefully drawn around these precious and permeable portals, guarding the inner self, the Ka and Ba from unseen dangers lurking in the spiritual ether, it's also highly probable that the raw materials from which coal was made, the dark, mysterious galena, wrested from deep within the hidden veins of the earth, or the vibrant, life-affirming malachite, with its swirling patterns like captured landscapes, were themselves believed to possess their own inherent magical properties and energies. These weren't just inert pigments waiting for a binder. They were substances imbued with the potent energies of their origins, with the very essence of the earth from which they came. The painstaking process of grinding and mixing them, perhaps accompanied by those quiet, personal prayers or softly hummed incantations we speculated about earlier, would have further activated, concentrated, or consecrated these inherent powers, transforming simple minerals into what was essentially a potent, magical amulet in a wearable paste form. This concern for magical protection wasn't just a preoccupation for the living, it was absolutely paramount for the deceased on their perilous and complex journey through the Duat. The Egyptian underworld, the afterlife, as imagined by the Egyptians, wasn't a simple heaven or hell. It was a realm fraught with dangers, terrifying demons, challenging gatekeepers, and rigorous trials of judgment. The deceased soul needed every magical aid, every divine connection, every protective amulet they could muster. Thus, coal was meticulously applied to the eyes of the mummy during the elaborate rites of embalming, not just to restore a semblance of lifelike appearance after the ravages of death and preservation, but, more importantly, to provide vital magical sight, clarity of vision, and unwavering protection in the spiritual realms they were about to navigate. The Book of the Dead, that essential funerary text which was essentially a guidebook to the afterlife, contains numerous spells and exhortations aimed at protecting the deceased and enabling them to overcome obstacles and pass judgment successfully. The concept of clear, protected, and magically potent vision is a recurring and vital theme throughout these sacred texts. Coal-lined eyes were, in this context, supernaturally charged eyes, capable of perceiving truths and repelling evils in the world beyond. It is a well-established mainstream historical fact that the ancient Egyptians held a strong and widespread belief in the apotropaic, that is, evil-averting power of coal eyeliner. They considered it a vital and indispensable defense against the malevolent influence of the evil eye and other harmful supernatural forces that they believed populated their world. The coal outline, as applied, very often intentionally styled to mimic the potent eye of Horus, the Ujat eye, served as a direct invocation of a supreme symbol of protection, health, and spiritual restoration. For a quirky tidbit that underscores just how deeply this belief was ingrained beyond its application on humans, its depiction on sacred animals, and its inclusion in funerary rites. Tiny miniature coal pots and even perfectly formed. Tiny model applicators have been discovered by archaeologists. These miniature cosmetic sets were sometimes incorporated into amuletic jewelry or found carefully placed in the foundation deposits of temples and other sacred structures. This strongly suggests that the very essence of coal, the tools intimately associated with its preparation and application, and the ritual act of its use were considered so magically potent in and of themselves that even their symbolic, miniaturized representation could offer a tangible degree of protection, blessing, or good fortune. It's like carrying a tiny, highly concentrated, symbolic shield generator in your amulet pouch for on-the-go spiritual defense. Now, while the fundamental apotropaic intent of coal use in ancient Egypt is widely accepted by scholars and well documented through both textual and archaeological evidence, the precise hierarchy and interplay of the perceived magical mechanisms, whether the primary defense was believed to come from the direct reflection of negative energy by the dark pigment, the sympathetic magic invoked by replicating the powerful Udjat symbol, the inherent protective spiritual qualities of the mineral ingredients themselves, or, most likely, a synergistic combination of all these elements, likely encompassed a complex spectrum of beliefs that could vary by region. Specific historical period, an individual's social standing, and their level of esoteric or priestly understanding. So you can just imagine, if you sensed particularly strong evil eye vibes emanating from your neighbor, perhaps someone who openly coveted your prize-winning fat goose, your beautifully irrigated patch of flourishing barley, or even your particularly handsome spouse, you'd probably make absolutely sure to lay on that coal extra thick, extra dark, and extra sharp that morning. Better safe than sorry, or worse, finding your goose suddenly listless, your barley inexplicably blighted, or your spouse suddenly complaining of a mysterious ailment. It was practical magic woven into the fabric of everyday anxieties and social interactions. When you really stop and ponder it, this wasn't your average run-of-the-mill department store eyeliner whose main claim to fame is being waterproof or lasting for 24 hours. It's almost like those crystal-infused facial mist or gemstone elixirs some people use today, hoping for good vibes, clearer skin, or a boost in their personal energy field. But instead of just general good vibes, the ancient Egyptian kohl was heavy-duty, demon-repelling, curse-averting, soul-guarding eyeliner. Much more practical, and with significantly higher stakes, really, especially when you're dealing with ancient Egyptian deities, underworld monsters, and the ever-present threat of everyday malice. This profound and unwavering belief in kohl's magical shielding capabilities elevates it once more, beyond the merely cosmetic, beyond the purely medicinal, into the essential realm of spiritual armor, a fundamental tool for navigating a world perceived to be alive with unseen forces. It underscores just how deeply and seamlessly intertwined the ancient Egyptians saw the physical, the aesthetic, the practical, and the magical, all brought into sharp, clear focus through those captivating, kohl-defined eyes, which were not just passively seeing the world, but were actively, powerfully, and magically shaping their safe and prosperous passage through it. So, having armed themselves against the harsh desert elements, the unseen menace of bacteria, and even the far more insidious threat of malevolent spirits and the dreaded evil eye with their magically charged kohl. The ancient Egyptians also keenly understood that those same dark, defining lines spoke volumes in the more mundane, but no less complex and often treacherous, realm of human society, personal status, and perceived beauty. Kohl wasn't just a shield, it was also a statement. In the ancient Egyptian ideal of beauty, an ideal that graced temple walls, statues, and delicate papyri for millennia, the eyes held a position of paramount importance. Large, luminous, almond-shaped eyes, often compared to the sacred and watchful eyes of the falcon god Horus, or the gentle, wise eyes of the cow goddess Hathor, were considered exceptionally attractive. Such eyes were thought to symbolize life itself, vitality, alertness, youthfulness, and even a touch of the divine. Kohl was the essential, indispensable tool to achieve this coveted look. When expertly applied, it had the power to visually enlarge, elongate, and intensely emphasize the eyes, making them appear more expressive, more captivating, more mysterious, and more perfectly aligned with these deeply ingrained aesthetic and even spiritual standards. A well-kohled eye was a beautiful eye, and a beautiful eye was a sign of a vibrant and blessed individual. Now, as we've mentioned throughout our sleepy journey, the use of kohl in some basic form was remarkably widespread, reaching across the social spectrum from the humble farmer toiling in the fields to the mighty pharaoh ruling over all of Egypt. But this doesn't mean that kohl was an entirely egalitarian cosmetic, a sort of one-size-fits-all ancient eyeliner. Oh no. The ancient Egyptians, like most complex and hierarchical societies throughout history, had their subtle and, at times, not so subtle ways of signaling social standing, wealth, and access to resources. While a common laborer might use a simple, functional kohl made with readily available local materials, perhaps stored in a basic, unadorned pottery vessel or even a hollowed-out reed segment, and applied with a simple wooden stick. The elite of Egyptian society played a whole different cosmetic game. Their status could be elegantly, yet unmistakably displayed through several aspects of their kohl use. Firstly, There was the superior quality of their coal. For the wealthy, this might mean coal made from more meticulously purified galena, ground to an even finer, more silken consistency, ensuring a smoother application and a richer, deeper black. Perhaps their coal was blended with rarer, more expensive, or even imported oils as binders, or included exotic fragrant resins that added a subtle, costly perfume to the cosmetic, a whisper of Punt or the Levant. The containers themselves, those exquisite coal pots we've admired in previous sections, were often blatant advertisements of wealth, taste, and connections, fashioned from shimmering, translucent alabaster, precious and smooth ivory, brilliant blue or green faience sometimes with intricate painted details, or even for the truly opulent, made of or inlaid with gold, silver, or semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli and carnelian. And the applicators too, a simple, smooth twig for one individual, a finely wrought silver bronze, or carved ivory wand for another. These were not just tools, they were treasures, clear markers of a privileged life. Furthermore, the skill and style of the coal application could itself tell a story of status. A perfectly drawn, flawlessly symmetrical, perhaps more elaborate or fashionably current coal line, a dramatic sweep or a delicate, precise outline, would indicate not only personal care and attention to detail, but also, crucially, leisure time. It spoke of having the time to apply it so meticulously yourself, or even the wealth and status to have a skilled servant or family member dedicate their time to your beautification. It was, in many ways, the ancient Egyptian equivalent of modern power dressing, but specifically and powerfully concentrated on your face. Your eyeliner could silently announce, "I command legions and have important temple duties." Or it might more humbly suggest, "I just finished tilling the North Field and hope the inundation is good this year." Look at the statues of kings and queens, the painted reliefs that adorn the tombs of nobles, high priests, and powerful officials. Their coal is almost invariably depicted with an idealized precision, sharp, clean, and perfectly enhancing their regal, serene, or divine gaze. This wasn't just an artistic convention chosen at random. It was a deliberate act of reinforcing their elevated status, their proximity to the gods, their embodiment of Mayat, order, truth, and cosmic perfection. It's a mainstream historical fact that while the practice of wearing coal was common across virtually all social strata in ancient Egypt, the quality and purity of the coal itself, the preciousness of the materials, the artistry, and the craftsmanship evident in the cosmetic containers and applicators, and the elaborateness, precision, and fashionableness of the application style often served as clear and readily understood indicators of an individual's social status, wealth, influence, and refinement. For a quirky tidbit that really drives this home, it's quite telling that high-status individuals, including pharaohs, queens, and wealthy nobles, were often buried with an impressive and extensive array of cosmetic equipment. Their tombs have yielded multiple coal pots made of the finest and most precious materials, a variety of elegant applicators, and sometimes even grinding pallets and grinders, as if to ensure they had everything they needed. This wasn't just about looking good for Osiris and the other gods in the Hall of Judgment. It was very much about ensuring they could maintain their earthly status, their proper and dignified appearance, and their continued access to these important symbols of rank and refinement, even as they navigated the complex social hierarchies and challenges of the afterlife. Imagine the ethereal packing list for eternity. My magnificent Ka statue, check. My personalized copy of the Book of the Dead, with all the best spells, check. My 5 best faience and alabaster coal pots, and that lovely silver applicator with the lotus finial. Absolutely essential. One must maintain standards, even in the duat. Now, the extent to which specific coal application styles were rigidly codified according to an individual's precise social rank, professional role, or even age group, versus being more fluidly influenced by evolving fashions that might trickle down from the royal court, distinct regional preferences across Upper and Lower Egypt, or simply individual aesthetic choices and artistic license, even among the elite themselves, is an area that continues to intrigue and be actively explored by researchers, examining the subtle variations in artistic representations and archaeological cosmetic finds across different dynasties and locations. Were there coal police ensuring you didn't wear a line above your station? Probably not literally, Mummin, but social expectation can be a powerful enforcer. Beyond just displaying wealth or adhering to beauty norms, a well-maintained appearance, which certainly included neatly and appropriately applied kohl, was likely also a fundamental sign of respectability, of being put together in a way that signaled you were a civilized, responsible, and integrated member of society. It demonstrated self-respect, an attention to detail, and a proper regard for social customs, and perhaps even religious propriety. If you were appearing before a magistrate, presenting offerings at a temple, or engaging in important trade negotiations, looking the part, with your eyes correctly and respectfully adorned, was probably quite important for how you were perceived and treated. And remember, this wasn't an exclusively female preoccupation. As we've noted, men of all classes, and particularly those of higher status, powerful male officials, revered priests, or conquering generals, wore kohl with just as much dedication and care. A pair of well-defined kohl-lined eyes was considered an integral part of an authoritative, dignified, and virile male presentation. For both men and women, kohl was a key component of the ideal, status-appropriate and culturally resonant appearance. One can almost imagine the subtle social pressures, the internal monologues. Is my kohl line sufficiently elongated and dramatically upswept to truly reflect my recent, hard-won promotion to overseer of the royal granaries? Or does it perhaps scream assistant scribe third class? Still struggling with hieratic script? These are the critical questions that might have kept ancient Egyptian regional managers and ambitious officials up at night, tossing and turning on their comfortable reed mats or wooden headrests. The anxiety of proper presentation is timeless. So, while it's easy for us in our modern, often cynical world to sometimes dismiss a strong focus on personal appearance as mere vanity or superficiality, in ancient Egypt, the lines of kohl drawn around the eyes were deeply and inextricably encoded with rich social meaning. They were part of a complex visual language that communicated identity, belonging, aspiration, social hierarchy, and personal power. Forget the latest designer handbag, the flashiest chariot, or the biggest pyramid. Well, maybe not the biggest pyramid. In ancient Egypt, true understated elegance and undeniable status might have been most clearly and consistently communicated through the exquisite quality of your vibrant faience kohl pot and the absolutely perfect divine execution of your daily cat-eye flick. Priorities, after all. These carefully drawn beauty and wealth lines were therefore far more than just superficial adornment. They were absolutely integral to the social fabric of ancient Egyptian life. They reinforced hierarchy. They expressed personal and collective identity. And they helped individuals to navigate their complex world with the visual cues appropriate to their station, their ambitions, and their desire to appear both beautiful and blessed, all while looking effortlessly timeless and, of course, just a little bit magical. We've spent some time admiring how the subtle nuances of kohl, its quality, its containers, the artistry of its application, could signal one's precise station in the intricate, hierarchical tapestry of ancient Egyptian society. The lines could whisper of wealth, leisure, and power, a silent language understood by all. But one of the most truly remarkable and defining aspects of this ancient cosmetic is precisely its astonishing reach beyond the gilded circles of the elite, beyond the courts of pharaohs and the hallowed halls of temples. This wasn't a practice confined to queens, courtiers, and high priests, to be gazed upon with envy by the masses. Kohl, in its essence, in its fundamental purpose, was for every face a unifying thread in the diverse fabric of Egyptian life. Let's be absolutely clear from the outset in ancient Egypt. Applying kohl was in no way considered an exclusively feminine pursuit, nor was it ever seen as effeminate or inappropriate for men. Quite the contrary. For an Egyptian man, lining his eyes with kohl was a powerful sign of virility, authority, and an adherence to revered cultural norms of attractiveness, presentation, and even piety. Pharaohs, those living gods on earth, are invariably depicted in statues and reliefs with strong, commanding, kohl-defined eyes. This was not mere artistic convention for aesthetic appeal. It emphasized their divine connection, their unwavering gaze of leadership, their ability to see and uphold Mahat, the cosmic order, warriors and soldiers heading into the fray or patrolling the desert borders would have worn kohl not just for the vital practical benefits of reducing sun glare during battle or on long, arduous desert campaigns, but also for the potent, magical protection it was believed to offer against enemy curses, the ill-omened glance of a foe, or the general spiritual dangers of conflict. Priests dedicated to the meticulous performance of sacred temple rituals would have used kohl to achieve a state of ritual purity, to enhance their spiritual vision for communing with the deities whose statues they tended, and to present themselves fittingly before the divine presence. Even craftsmen, scribes, and laborers, the very backbone of Egyptian society, would have applied their kohl. Even if your kohl line was a bit smudged and imperfect from a hard day's work hauling stones for a pyramid, meticulously inscribing complex hieroglyphs onto papyrus, or tending the irrigation canals, it was still there. A familiar comfort, a protective habit, doing its multifaceted job of shielding and defining. For Egyptian women, kohl was, of course, as we've explored, a powerful and versatile tool for enhancing their beauty according to the prevailing societal standards, skillfully accentuating their eyes to achieve that alluring, captivating, and often almond-shaped gaze so admired in their art and literature. It was a fundamental way to express femininity, grace, and perhaps a touch of alluring mystique. The application of kohl could be deeply connected to goddesses like Hathor, the golden embodiment of love, beauty, music, motherhood, and joy, thereby invoking her blessings and reflecting her divine attributes. But beyond aesthetics, the practical and magical protective aspects of kohl were profoundly important for women too, safeguarding their own health and well-being, and by extension, that of their households and especially their children. The use of green malachite kohl, with its strong symbolic ties to fertility, new life, and rejuvenation, might have held particular personal significance for women hoping for children, celebrating motherhood, or simply wishing to surround themselves with the vibrant energy of life. Perhaps most touchingly, and most indicative of its perceived essential nature, the practice of applying kohl extended even to the very youngest and most vulnerable members of Egyptian society. Infants and children. From a very early age, sometimes practically from birth, it is believed that children would have their eyes carefully and gently lined with kohl by their mothers or other caregivers. For these little ones, the primary reasons for this were almost entirely protective. The magical defense against the ever-feared evil eye, that glance of envy or malice, was paramount, as children were considered especially susceptible to such malevolent influences which could bring sickness or misfortune. Then there were the crucial practical shieldings protection from the harsh glare of the sun, from irritating wind-blown dust, and, very importantly, from those persistent, disease-carrying flies that could lead to devastating eye infections, a major cause of childhood illness and, tragically, often blindness in the ancient world. The perceived medicinal benefits of kohl, its ability to ward off or soothe infections, would have been a mother's primary concern and motivation. Artistic depictions from various periods often show children with kohl-lined eyes, sometimes applied in simpler, less stylized lines than those seen on adults, but unmistakably present. It was a fundamental act of maternal care, a visible prayer for the child's health, safety, and continued flourishing, drawn tenderly onto their very skin. This universality of coal use is truly striking. Despite the clear social stratifications that were evident in the quality of the pigments and binders, the costliness and artistry of the containers and applicators, and the elaborateness or simplicity of the application style, the fundamental act of wearing kohl, of defining one's eyes with these ancient, potent pigments, was a deeply ingrained shared cultural touchstone. It was part of what it meant to be Egyptian, a common thread woven through the lives of people from every walk of life. From the royal nursery where a prince or princess received their first delicate kohl lines, to the farmer's humble mud brick dwelling where a mother protected her child with a more rustic preparation. It is a well-supported mainstream historical fact that the use of kohl was a ubiquitous practice throughout the entirety of ancient Egyptian society. It was adopted and utilized by men, women, and children across all social classes, from the highest echelons of royalty, nobility, and priesthood, down to the common populace of farmers, artisans, and laborers. For all these individuals, kohl served a vital and inseparable combination of cosmetic enhancement, protective functions both practical against the harsh elements and magical against unseen malevolent forces, and perceived medicinal benefits. For a quirky tidbit that really emphasizes how deeply ingrained this practice was, we've previously mentioned kohl being depicted on statues of gods and sacred animals. But it's also incredibly fascinating and informative to find very small, extremely simple kohl palettes, roughly shaped grinders, or basic pottery kohl pots in the modest burials of ordinary, everyday people. These humble finds, lacking any of the glamour of royal accoutrements, powerfully attest to the fact that even those individuals with very limited means considered kohl an absolutely essential item, important enough to be included among their few precious grave goods to accompany them into the afterlife. This highlights its truly democratic reach and its fundamental importance to personal identity and well-being. Despite the obvious status distinctions evident in its finer, more luxurious forms, now, while artistic conventions in tomb paintings, reliefs, and statuary often depict idealized and sometimes standardized forms of kohl application across different age groups, the precise age at which kohl use typically began for children in everyday Egyptian life, and whether there were specific, universally observed domestic rituals, chants, or family traditions associated with a child's first kohl application beyond the general intent of protection, remain subjects of ongoing interest and scholarly speculation for which direct and unambiguous textual evidence is relatively scarce. We have the images, but the intimate personal details of these first applications are largely lost to the silence of time. One can only try to imagine the scene through the mists of millennia. A mother, perhaps humming a soft lullaby, gently but firmly trying to apply kohl to the eyes of a wriggly infant or a curious, active toddler. Getting a young child to sit still and cooperate during an eyeliner application must have been an Olympic-level sport even thousands of years ago, requiring immense patience and skill. It probably involved a lot of soothing words, distracting songs or toys, and maybe the ancient Egyptian equivalent of, "Here comes the little papyrus airplane, right towards your lovely eye, with the magic kohl don't blink." In a way, kohl was like the ancient Egyptian equivalent of almost everyone owning a mobile phone today. There were vastly different models and features available, based on your budget, your status, and your needs. From the most basic, functional reed container holding simple kohl to the stunning gold-inlaid faience pot containing perfumed, expertly ground pigment. But almost everyone, from the top to the bottom of society, from the youngest babe to the most venerable elder, had access to this fundamental technology for basic connection. In kohl's case, connection to their cultural identity, to their gods, to societal norms of presentation, and to a deeply felt sense of personal well-being, beauty, and spiritual protection. This widespread adoption, this daily ritual shared by king and commoner, by man, woman, and child alike, serves to underscore just how profoundly integral kohl was to the ancient Egyptian worldview and way of life. It wasn't merely a fleeting fashion accessory or a simple folk remedy. It was a fundamental component of Egyptian identity, a visible marker of belonging to this ancient, resilient, and enduringly coal-eyed civilization that continues to captivate our imaginations. We've established that kohl was a truly universal practice in ancient Egypt, gracing every face from the smallest, most vulnerable child to the most powerful, revered pharaoh, weaving a common thread of shared cultural identity across the land of the Nile. But this daily ritual, this careful adornment of the eyes that we've explored through the lenses of practicality, medicine, magic, and social status, wasn't just about earthly concerns, as important as those were. It was profoundly, deeply, and inextricably connected to the gods themselves, to the sacred myths that ordered their cosmos, and to the solemn, meticulous rituals that sought to maintain that divine order and ensure the continued benevolence of the divine towards humanity. At the very heart of Kohl's divine significance lies the potent and beloved figure of Horus, the majestic falcon-headed god of the sky, the rightful heir to the throne of Egypt, the divine archetype of kingship, and a steadfast symbol of protection. His epic story, one of the cornerstone myths of Egyptian religion, is one of intense struggle, heartbreaking sacrifice, and ultimate resounding triumph. In his series of epic battles with his usurping uncle Seth, the god of chaos, storms, and the untamed desert, Horus famously lost one of his eyes, or, in some versions, had it grievously wounded and torn out. This precious eye, often specifically identified as the left eye, which was associated with the moon and its cycles of waxing and waning, was then magically, miraculously healed and restored. This act of divine healing is typically attributed to the wisdom and magical prowess of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of knowledge, writing, and magic, or sometimes to the gentle, nurturing care of the goddess Hathor. This restored eye became known to the Egyptians as the Udjat eye, a name that translates to something like the whole one, the healthy one, or the undamaged one. It wasn't just a mended eye, it transformed into one of the most powerful and frequently invoked symbols in the entire Egyptian iconographic repertoire. The Udjat eye came to represent profound concepts of healing, complete restoration from injury or illness, royal legitimacy and authority, unwavering divine protection against all forms of evil, and ultimately, the enduring triumph of Order Mesed over the destructive forces of chaos Isfet. So, when an ancient Egyptian meticulously drew those dark, elongated lines of kohl around their own mortal eyes, often consciously and carefully mimicking the distinct, stylized form of the Udjat symbol, they were doing far more than just applying a fashionable cosmetic. They were performing a daily, personal act of sympathetic magic, a potent invocation. They were identifying with the struggles and resilience of Horus, drawing his divine strength, his proven protective power, directly onto their own bodies, framing their own vision with his sacred, restored sight. It wasn't just eyeliner, it was in a very real and tangible sense. Applied theology, a wearable, visible prayer for wholeness, health, and divine defense. Then there was Ra, the supreme sun god, often considered the king of the deities, whose daily journey across the sky and his magnificent solar bark brought light, warmth, and life to the world, banishing the darkness and chaos of the night. Ra, too, possessed a powerful, all-seeing eye, the Eye of Ra. This solar eye was often considered a distinct entity from the lunar eye of Horus, though in some contexts their symbolism could merge or overlap. The Eye of Ra was a fierce, often terrifyingly destructive force, a solar emblem of immense and unblinking power. It was frequently personified by a range of powerful goddesses, such as Sekhmet, the formidable lioness-headed bringer of plagues but also the protector of the righteous king, or Hathor in her more formidable, fiery aspects, or the sleek cat goddess Bastet. This solar eye could see all, know all, and had the terrifying power to smite the enemies of Ra and of Egypt with its fiery gaze. The kohl that outlined the Egyptian eye, perhaps especially when it contained that subtle shimmer reminiscent of the sun's dazzling brilliance, may well have been believed to link the wearer to this awesome, all-seeing, all-powerful solar force, symbolically enhancing their own ability to perceive truth, to discern danger, and to project an aura of divine authority and unwavering protection. To face the world with coal-lined eyes was, in a way, to face it with a gaze touched and empowered by the sun's undiluted, life-sustaining, and enemy-destroying power. Other deities were also intimately associated with cosmetics and personal adornment. Hathor, in her more universally benevolent and beloved aspects, was the goddess of love, beauty, joy, music, dance, fertility, and, very explicitly, cosmetics. Her temples might well have been centers where knowledge of cosmetic preparation, perfumery, and beautification was refined, preserved, and passed down through generations of her priestesses. These priestesses, and indeed all who worshipped Hathor, would have certainly used kohl and other adornments in her honor, seeking to embody her delightful attributes of charm and grace. Bastet, the enigmatic cat goddess, a beloved protector of the home, women and children, was also closely associated with pleasure, perfumes, and ointments. Statues and depictions of Bastet almost invariably show her with beautifully lined, captivating feline eyes, reinforcing the divine approval and inherent sanctity of such adornment. This deep divine connection naturally meant that kohl played a crucial and multifaceted role in formal religious rituals and temple life. Priests and priestesses, before they could dare to enter the most sacred, restricted spaces of the temples or perform the holy rites for the gods, had to undergo meticulous and extensive purification rituals. These often included ceremonial washing, anointing the body with sacred oils, donning fresh linen garments, and, almost certainly, the careful and symbolic application of kohl to their eyes. This act would have prepared them to see and interact with the divine presence, to withstand the awesome power of the gods, and to maintain their own ritual purity in the face of the sacred. Perhaps the most significant and visually potent ritualistic use of kohl was in the opening of the mouth ceremony. This complex and vital rite was performed not only on the statues of deities to enable the god's spirit or kai to inhabit the cult image, thereby making it a living presence on earth, but also on mummies to reanimate the senses of the deceased, allowing them to breathe, speak, eat, and see in the afterlife. During this elaborate ceremony, the eyes and mouth of the statue or mummy were symbolically touched with various ritual implements, and kohl would be carefully applied to the eyes, symbolically opening them, granting vision, and allowing the divine or deceased entity to perceive the world, to receive offerings, and to become an active, conscious presence. Even divine statues, those magnificent cult images meticulously crafted from stone, wood, or precious metals and housed in the shadowy inner sanctuaries of the temples, needed their eyeliner touched up daily, or at least very regularly as part of the daily temple liturgy. This act of adornment was part of the care and maintenance that kept the god alive in their earthly dwelling, ensuring they could properly glare with divine displeasure at any misbehaving spirits or benevolently watch over their loyal devotees. Celestial skincare and sacred makeup routines were clearly a serious and indispensable business. It's a mainstream historical fact that the application of kohl in ancient Egypt was deeply and inextricably intertwined with their complex religious beliefs and elaborate ritual practices. This connection is most notably and visibly demonstrated through its strong association with the Eye of Horus, the Ujat Eye, a pervasive and incredibly powerful symbol of divine protection, physical healing, and royal authority. Furthermore, kohl was integral to numerous temple rituals, including, most significantly, the ceremonial adornment and symbolic enlivening of divine statues, which allowed them to function as effective conduits for the god's presence and power on earth. For a quirky tidbit that really underscores this sacred value temple inventory list, painstakingly inscribed on papyrus scrolls or stone stelae, sometimes meticulously record specific quantities of galena or malachite, the raw mineral ingredients for kohl, Among the temple's valuable treasures, ritual supplies, and everyday provisions. This clearly indicates that these cosmetic minerals were themselves considered precious enough to be stored in divine treasuries and were regularly required for use in sacred rites. The upkeep of cult statues, and perhaps even as direct offerings to the gods, highlighting their profound ritual importance far beyond simple personal adornment. Now, the precise extent to which the average ancient Egyptian, in the course of performing their daily personal kohl application, consciously focused on and mentally recited the specific, complex mythological narratives of Horus's lost and restored eye or the fierce protective power of the Eye of Ra, versus holding a more generalized, culturally ingrained understanding of kohl as a divinely sanctioned, protective, beautifying, and health-giving agent, is a fascinating question with likely varied answers across different historical periods. Geographical locations and levels of individual piety, education, and esoteric knowledge. For some, it was deep theology. For others, a trusted tradition. By adorning their eyes with kohl, the ancient Egyptians were, in a way, aspiring to achieve and reflect a semblance of the divine gaze itself, all-seeing, all-knowing, perfectly protected, and radiantly beautiful or imposingly powerful. Perhaps the kohl was even believed to actively enhance spiritual vision, allowing the wearer, whether a high priest engaged in complex divination or a commoner seeking guidance in a dream, to perceive truths or presences beyond the mundane. Everyday world, acting as a sort of spiritual lens clarifier or conduit for divine insight. It's rather like getting ready for a really important, high-stakes spiritual Zoom meeting with the ultimate CEO of the cosmos. You definitely want your eyes to look powerful, perceptive, and receptive to any divine memos, sacred insights, or godly pronouncements that might come your way. Look sharp for the divine. Thus, every single time an ancient Egyptian, regardless of their station in life, picked up their kohl stick and carefully drew those defining lines around their eyes, they weren't just engaging in a simple beauty routine or a practical act of sun protection. They were actively participating in a sacred, ancient tradition. They were reaffirming their connection to the divine, invoking the protective power of their most revered gods, and drawing a tangible line of sacred defense around their very being. The kohl on their eyes was far more than pigment. It was a visible testament to their faith, a daily enactment of their place within a divinely ordered, magically charged, and eternally watched-over universe. The sacred power, the practical benefits, and the undeniable allure of ancient Egyptian kohl, all wrapped up in those striking dark lines that framed the windows to the soul, were not destined to remain a closely guarded secret, confined solely within the fertile black land of Kemet, the beloved ancient name for Egypt itself. Like the life-giving waters of the mighty Nile, which flowed ever northwards to meet the Great Green Sea, their name for the Mediterranean, Egypt's cultural influence, and with it, its iconic kohl eyeliner, also flowed outwards. This potent cosmetic and the practices surrounding it embarked on a fascinating cultural journey, carried by trade, conquest, and diplomacy to neighboring lands and eventually to distant shores, leaving its subtle, dark trace on the faces of diverse ancient peoples. This wasn't an overnight trend that swept across the ancient world like a viral TikTok dance. Of course, the spread of kohl and Egyptian eyeliner practices was a more gradual, nuanced process, facilitated by the intricate and ever-evolving networks of ancient life. Over centuries, even millennia. Trade was undoubtedly a primary engine driving this cosmetic diffusion. Egyptian caravans, laden with precious gold from Nubian mines, fine linen textiles, fragrant incense, durable papyrus, and a host of other luxury goods, including finely crafted kohl pots, prepared kohl paste, or perhaps even the raw mineral ingredients like galena and malachite, traversed the arduous desert routes. They headed south into Nubia, forging deep connections, and east into the bustling city-states of the Levant. Simultaneously, Egyptian ships, with their characteristic square sails, plied the waters of the Mediterranean, carrying these coveted commodities to the thriving ports of Crete, Cyprus, and the wider Aegean world. Then there were periods of significant Egyptian imperial expansion, particularly during the powerful New Kingdom era, roughly 1550 to 1070 BCE, when Egyptian political and military control extended deep into Nubia to the south and exerted considerable influence over parts of Syria, Palestine, and the Levant. This direct Egyptian administration, the presence of Egyptian soldiers, officials, craftsmen, and settlers, would have naturally and powerfully facilitated the transmission of Egyptian customs, including their daily grooming and cosmetic rituals, into these foreign lands. Diplomatic exchanges between the great royal courts of the Near East also played a crucial role. Imagine a visiting dignitary or a foreign princess arriving at the Egyptian court, or vice versa, being gifted an exquisite jewel-like set of Egyptian cosmetic tools, a subtle but potent form of cultural diplomacy, an exchange of beauty secrets along with treaties, and, of course, on a more individual level, ordinary travelers, merchants plying their trade, mercenaries seeking employment in foreign armies, and migrants settling in new lands would have carried their personal habits, including their specific ways of using coal, with them, planting these cultural seeds in new soil. So, where did Egyptian coal make its mark to Egypt's immediate south, in the ancient land of Nubia, also known to history as Kush? Egyptian cultural influence was particularly profound and long-standing, a complex relationship of trade, rivalry, and eventual Nubian rule over Egypt itself during their 25th dynasty. Nubian art, from majestic royal statues to vibrant tomb paintings, frequently depicts figures, kings, queens, nobles, and commoners alike, with their eyes dramatically lined in a style unmistakably borrowed from or shared with Egypt. Archaeological excavations in numerous Nubian sites have unearthed a wealth of coal pots, palettes, and applicators that are virtually identical to those found in contemporary Egyptian contexts. A clear and tangible testament to their enthusiastic adoption of this quintessential Egyptian practice. Eastwards, in the bustling city-states and kingdoms of the Levant, ancient Canaan, Syria, and Phoenicia, active and centuries-old trade routes and close diplomatic ties with Egypt led to a significant and ongoing exchange of cultural goods, artistic motifs, and ideas. While these Levantine cultures possessed their own distinct and vibrant artistic traditions, the undeniable allure of sophisticated Egyptian aesthetics, including the striking coal-lined eye, certainly made its mark. Small faience coal pots of Egyptian manufacture, or clever local imitations, are often found in Levantine archaeological contexts, particularly in tombs, suggesting that this cosmetic practice was valued and adopted by their elites. Across the Mediterranean Sea, the sophisticated Minoan civilization on the island of Crete and the later Mycenaean culture of mainland Greece also maintained active trade and diplomatic contact with pharaonic Egypt. While their artistic representations of the human eye are often stylized in a manner quite different from the Egyptian canon. Some Minoan frescoes and Mycenaean figurines do depict figures with notably emphasized dark outlined eyes. This hints at possible Egyptian or broader Near Eastern influences on their cosmetic practices. A whisper of coal carried across the waves. Coal was basically the original beauty influencer, its iconic style going viral across the Bronze Age world. No Instagram or elaborate social media campaigns were needed. Just really good, reliable trade routes and some very persuasive, well-adorned merchants. Even much later, the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome, while developing their own distinct and often more understated cosmetic repertoires, were not entirely immune to the allure of dramatic eye makeup that had its deep roots in Egypt and the East. The Romans, for example, famously used a substance called stibium, which was often antimony sulfide rather than the lead sulfide of Egyptian galena, to darken their eyebrows and sometimes their eyelids, a practice that likely filtered into Roman culture through their extensive contacts with the Eastern Mediterranean traditions, which themselves had been touched centuries earlier by the pervasive and prestigious influence of Egyptian coal. So, what exactly did these neighboring and more distant cultures adopt from Egypt? It was certainly, at its most basic, the practice of lining the eyes to enhance their appearance, to make them look larger, more defined, more striking, and more expressive, aligning with a widely shared, perhaps even universal human appreciation for captivating and communicative eyes. They also adopted, where possible or economically viable, similar materials. Galena, if locally available through mining or easily accessible via trade networks, was likely used. Otherwise, local substitutes such as antimony compounds, manganese oxides, or even simple soot collected from oil lamps might have been employed to achieve a similar dark effect. One can almost imagine resourceful individuals in other cultures, perhaps less blessed with direct access to Egyptian luxury goods, trying to get that perfect, sharp Egyptian eye flick with, like, just a carefully burnt almond or a finely ground piece of charcoal and a prayer for good results. The struggle was real, one imagines, before the official coal by Kemet export line, or at least its raw ingredients became more readily available in their local markets. It's a mainstream historical fact that ancient Egyptian practices of using coal for eyeliner, along with the cosmetic product itself and its associated paraphernalia, such as distinctively shaped coal pots and applicators, significantly influenced the cosmetic traditions of neighboring cultures throughout Nubia, the Levant, and the wider Eastern Mediterranean and Aegean worlds. This influence is clearly evidenced by numerous archaeological finds of Egyptian-made or Egyptian-style cosmetic artifacts in these regions, as well as by the depiction of similar eye makeup styles in the local art of these contemporaneous cultures. For a quirky and delightful tidbit, it's quite fascinating for archaeologists, and for us as sleepy history enthusiasts, when they unearth distinctively Egyptian-made or Egyptian-style coal pots, those tiny faience tubes, perhaps still bearing a hint of their original vibrant glaze, or elegant alabaster jars, or even distinctively shaped cosmetic spoons and applicators. In archaeological sites located far from the Nile Valley, perhaps one turns up in a Canaanite warrior's tomb, another in the storeroom of a Minoan palace on Crete, or a third in a wealthy Nubian grave. These small, intimate, personal items act as tiny, silent ambassadors of Egyptian culture, tangible and evocative evidence of ancient connections, trade links, and the far-reaching, cross-cultural appeal of Egyptian aesthetics and daily practices. Now, the precise degree to which the complex symbolic and religious meanings of coal that were so deeply embedded in Egyptian culture, encompassing its vital roles in magical protection against the evil eye, its profound associations with specific powerful deities like Horus and Ra, and its array of perceived medicinal benefits, were fully understood, adopted, and integrated alongside the mere cosmetic practice by these neighboring cultures, versus being selectively adapted, reinterpreted through the lens of their own local belief systems and pre-existing traditions, or perhaps even largely ignored in favor of purely aesthetic considerations, remains a subject of ongoing scholarly investigation and nuanced interpretation. Did they just like the look? Or did they truly get the whole spiritual and protective package deal that came with it in Egypt? The answer likely varies greatly. This outward spread of coal wasn't just about a look becoming trendy across the ancient Near East and Mediterranean, though it certainly was a very compelling and enduring aesthetic. It was about the transmission of a whole package of ideas, prestige, and cultural capital related to beauty, protection, and perhaps even a certain worldly sophistication associated with the mighty Egyptian civilization. It was the ancient equivalent of everyone suddenly wanting, say, French perfume or Italian silk in later eras, a desirable commodity that carried with it an aura of its origin. Or, to use a more modern, if slightly anachronistic, analogy, it was like everyone suddenly wanting sourdough starter during a global lockdown, but instead of artisanal bread, it was perfectly lined, powerfully gazing eyes. A bit more glamorous, arguably. And the coal trend certainly lasted much longer than the sourdough craze did for some of us. The fascinating journey of coal beyond Egypt's borders powerfully highlights its potent cultural capital. It was demonstrably more than just makeup, it was a portable piece of Egyptian identity, a tangible symbol of its advanced, sophisticated, and highly influential civilization. A practice that other cultures clearly admired, desired, and sought to emulate in their own ways, thereby weaving the timeless allure of the coal-lined eye into the broader, interconnected tapestry of the ancient world. We've traced the fascinating journey of coal as it flowed outwards from Egypt, influencing the cosmetic practices and aesthetic ideals of distant cultures across the ancient world. But now, let us return our sleepy focus to the heartland of coal, to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, and delve into some of the most intimate, revealing, and often beautifully preserved places where its legacy has been enshrined, the silent, sealed tombs of ancient Egypt. For it is here, amongst treasures carefully chosen and meticulously prepared for the afterlife, that coal and its associated accoutrements whisper some of their most poignant, personal, and enduring stories across the millennia. The ancient Egyptian view of the afterlife, and as you may know, wasn't one of ethereal, disembodied spirits floating aimlessly in some vague heavenly realm. They envisioned it as a tangible continuation, albeit a more challenging, perilous, and spiritually charged version of their earthly existence. To successfully navigate the numerous perils of the Duat, the complex and often terrifying underworld, to stand with a truthful heart before the great god Osiris in the Hall of Judgment, and to ultimately achieve a blissful, eternal existence in the idyllic field of reeds, the deceased needed to be fully and properly equipped, both spiritually and, in a very real sense, physically. Clear vision was considered absolutely essential, not only to read the sacred protective texts like the Book of the Dead, which served as a kind of spiritual GPS for the afterlife, but also to correctly identify the various gods, goddesses, and potentially hostile demons they would encounter on their journey. Potent magical protection, as we've discussed, was paramount against the myriad dangers that lurked in the Duat, and maintaining one's proper appearance, one's individual identity, social status, and sense of wholeness, even when standing before the divine tribunal of gods, was considered vitally important. Coal, with its multifaceted powers of protection, its ability to enhance vision in various ways, its connection to divine beauty, and its role in asserting identity, was therefore not some frivolous luxury for the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, it was an absolute, indispensable necessity. Perhaps no tomb discovery has captured the world's imagination quite like that of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun, unearthed by Howard Carter and his team in 1922. Among the truly dazzling array of golden chariots, intricate jewelry, sacred statues, and royal regalia were also found more personal, everyday items, including a remarkable and quite extensive collection of cosmetic equipment. Exquisite coal pots crafted from translucent alabaster and vibrant blue faience, delicate applicators made of ivory and reed, and ornate compartmentalized cosmetic chests designed to hold these precious items were all found carefully placed within the tomb, ready for the boy king's use in eternity. These incredibly well-preserved finds offer a stunning and intimate glimpse into royal cosmetic practices and powerfully underscore the fact that even a young king, already destined for the exalted company of gods, needed his coal. Apparently, even when you're hoping to spend eternity basking in the glorious sunshine of the field of reeds, you still want to ensure your eyeliner is perfectly on point and your divine gaze is supernaturally sharp for your ongoing audience with Osiris. But the dazzling treasures of Tutankhamun, while uniquely spectacular in their completeness and richness, are by no means unique in this particular regard. Tombs from all major periods of Egyptian history, from the Old Kingdom pyramid builders, through the powerful nobles and officials of the Middle Kingdom, to the imperial rulers and wealthy citizens of the New Kingdom, and even continuing into the Greco-Roman period, have consistently yielded coal and its related paraphernalia. And importantly, these finds are not restricted solely to the burials of royalty or the super elite. While the materials might be humbler, a simple, undecorated pottery coal pot, A roughly carved wooden applicator, the consistent presence of coal equipment in the burials of officials, priests, artisans, and even relatively common people powerfully demonstrates the universal importance attributed to this substance for a successful and well-equipped afterlife. Regardless of one's earthly station, we owe much of our detailed knowledge of these intimate ancient practices to Egypt's extraordinarily arid climate and the carefully sealed, protected environment of many of its tombs. This miraculous natural preservation has meant that it's not just the durable stone or faience coal pots that have survived the ravages of time, but sometimes the very coal paste itself, now dried and hardened, but still chemically analyzable, can be found still inside its ancient container. Applicators made of organic materials like wood or ivory, which would have quickly perished and disintegrated in damper, less forgiving climates, are often found perfectly preserved, sometimes still bearing faint traces of the coal they last applied. This incredible level of survival allows modern scientists, as we've discussed in earlier sections, to perform detailed chemical analyses on the ancient coal, confirming the widespread use of galena and malachite, identifying the various oils and fats used as binders, and even revealing those intriguing trace lead salts that may have contributed to coal's ancient medicinal reputation. These tomb treasures, therefore, are so much more than just curious or beautiful relics. They are invaluable, direct windows into the daily lives, the cherished beliefs, and the funerary practices of the ancient Egyptians. They confirm for us the specific ingredients used in coal, sometimes allowing researchers to reconstruct ancient recipes with a surprising degree of accuracy. They showcase the evolution of artistic styles and craftsmanship in the tools themselves, the changing shapes of grinding palettes over the centuries, the popular decorative motifs on coal pots from different dynasties, the preferred materials for applicators in various periods. Sometimes, the way coal has been applied to the mummy itself, or to the anthropoid coffin or the serene face of a funerary mask, can reflect contemporary styles of the living, providing a poignant snapshot of fashion and ideal appearance, frozen in time and intended for eternity. Above all, the sheer, consistent presence and often surprising quantity of these cosmetic items found in burials across the social spectrum underscore the profound and unwavering importance the Egyptians placed on coal for their safe journey through and successful existence in the afterlife. You know how you sometimes overpack for a simple week's holiday, throwing in extra outfits and toiletries, just in case? Well, it seems some ancient Egyptians thoroughly overpacked for eternity. Better bring at least 5 coal pots and a spare applicator? Darling, one can almost hear them thinking. One can never be too prepared or look too shabby when one is about to meet Anubis and the 42 divine assessors in the Hall of Truth. It's a well-established mainstream historical fact that ancient Egyptian tombs, ranging from the opulent, treasure-filled burials of pharaohs such as Tutankhamun to the more modest, simple graves of common individuals, have frequently yielded quantities of coal, along with specialized coal containers, pots, or tubes, slender applicators, grinding pallets, and other related cosmetic implements. This widespread and consistent inclusion of cosmetic equipment as essential grave goods powerfully underscores the ancient Egyptian belief that these items were absolutely vital for the deceased in the afterlife, necessary for ensuring clear vision in the spiritual realm, providing magical protection, maintaining their personal identity and status, and appearing appropriately and respectfully before the gods. For a quirky and rather charming tidbit, it's quite delightful when archaeologists discover what appears to be a complete, personal, cosmetic set carefully placed within a tomb. Perhaps a favorite coal pot, its matching applicator still resting neatly beside it or even inside it. A small, worn grinding palette still bearing faint pigment stains, and maybe even a polished bronze mirror, all lovingly arranged in a small wooden box or a woven reed basket. It's like uncovering a little ancient vanity case, packed with all the essentials for ensuring one looked one's best and felt thoroughly protected on the ultimate unknown journey. Some coal pots have even been found with the coal almost entirely used up, suggesting it was a cherished personal item, used extensively throughout life. now faithfully accompanying its owner into death, a silent testament to daily rituals. Now, whether the specific coal recipes and the elaborate, often highly stylized application methods found in elite funerary contexts, such as those prepared for royalty or high nobility, were perfectly identical to those used in their daily life by those same individuals, or if there were perhaps special funerary grade coal preparations with unique, perhaps more ritually pure ingredients, or even distinct ritualistic application methods specifically designated and consecrated for the deceased to enhance their passage, power, and perception in the afterlife, is a subtle but intriguing question that archaeologists, Egyptologists, and archaeochemists continue to investigate through meticulous analysis, textual research, and cross-comparison of funerary finds with any cosmetic-related discoveries from settlement sites. Were you buried with your everyday coal or your best meet the gods coal? The inclusion of coal in tombs wasn't just an afterthought, a casual tossing in of a few personal effects. It was a core, considered part of ensuring the deceased was properly and fully equipped for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. It's somewhat like making absolutely sure your phone is fully charged and topped up with international data before you embark on a long and uncertain journey to a foreign land today. Except for the ancient Egyptians, their long and uncertain journey was eternity itself, and being fully charged and connected meant having enough coal to look fabulous, see clearly, and confidently fend off any lurking demons or spiritual dangers in the great, mysterious beyond. These tomb treasures, these carefully preserved coal pots and ancient, elegant applicators, are therefore so much more than just fascinating archaeological artifacts to be displayed behind glass in museums. They are intimate, tangible echoes of individual lives, poignant expressions of deeply held, enduring beliefs about life, death, and eternity, and silent, eloquent witnesses to the Egyptians' profound conviction that even in the embrace of death, the coal-lined eye remained a potent source of power, identity, beauty, and a vital connection to the eternal. We've traced the fascinating journey of coal as it flowed outwards from Egypt, influencing the cosmetic practices and aesthetic ideals of distant cultures across the ancient world. But now, let us return our sleepy focus to the heartland of coal, to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, and delve into some of the most intimate, revealing, and often beautifully preserved places where its legacy has been enshrined, the silent, sealed tombs of ancient Egypt. For it is here, amongst treasures carefully chosen and meticulously prepared for the afterlife, that coal and its associated accoutrements whisper some of their most poignant, personal, and enduring stories across the millennia. The ancient Egyptian view of the afterlife, as you may know, wasn't one of ethereal, disembodied spirits floating aimlessly in some vague heavenly realm. They envisioned it as a tangible continuation, albeit a more challenging, perilous, and spiritually charged version of their earthly existence. To successfully navigate the numerous perils of the Duat, the complex and often terrifying underworld, to stand with a truthful heart before the great god Osiris in the Hall of Judgment, and to ultimately achieve a blissful, eternal existence in the idyllic field of reeds. The deceased needed to be fully and properly equipped, both spiritually and, in a very real sense, physically. Clear vision was considered absolutely essential, not only to read the sacred protective texts like the Book of the Dead, which served as a kind of spiritual GPS for the afterlife, but also to correctly identify the various gods, goddesses, and potentially hostile demons they would encounter on their journey. Potent magical protection, as we've discussed, was paramount against the myriad dangers that lurked in the Duat, and maintaining one's proper appearance, one's individual identity, social status, and sense of wholeness, even when standing before the divine tribunal of gods, was considered vitally important. Coal, with its multifaceted powers of protection, its ability to enhance vision in various ways, its connection to divine beauty, and its role in asserting identity, was therefore not some frivolous luxury for the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, It was an absolute indispensable necessity. Perhaps no tomb discovery has captured the world's imagination quite like that of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun, unearthed by Howard Carter and his team in 1922. Among the truly dazzling array of golden chariots, intricate jewelry, sacred statues, and royal regalia were also found more personal, everyday items, including a remarkable and quite extensive collection of cosmetic equipment, exquisite coal pots crafted from translucent alabaster and vibrant blue faience, delicate applicators made of ivory and reed, and ornate, compartmentalized cosmetic chests designed to hold these precious items were all found carefully placed within the tomb, ready for the Boy King's use in eternity. These incredibly well-preserved finds offer a stunning and intimate glimpse into royal cosmetic practices and powerfully underscore the fact that even a young king, already destined for the exalted company of gods, needed his coal. Apparently, even when you're hoping to spend eternity basking in the glorious sunshine of the Field of Reeds, you still want to ensure your eyeliner is perfectly on point and your divine gaze is supernaturally sharp for your ongoing audience with Osiris. But the dazzling treasures of Tutankhamun, while uniquely spectacular in their completeness and richness, are by no means unique in this particular regard. Tombs from all major periods of Egyptian history, from the Old Kingdom pyramid builders, through the powerful nobles and officials of the Middle Kingdom, to the imperial rulers and wealthy citizens of the New Kingdom, and even continuing into the Greco-Roman period, have consistently yielded coal and its related paraphernalia. And importantly, these finds are not restricted solely to the burials of royalty or the super elite. While the materials might be humbler, a simple, undecorated pottery coal pot, a roughly carved wooden applicator, the consistent presence of coal equipment in the burials of officials, priests, artisans, and even relatively common people powerfully demonstrates the universal importance attributed to this substance for a successful and well-equipped afterlife. Regardless of one's earthly station, we owe much of our detailed knowledge of these intimate ancient practices to Egypt's extraordinarily arid climate and the carefully sealed, protected environment of many of its tombs. This miraculous natural preservation has meant that it's not just the durable stone or faience coal pots that have survived the ravages of time, but sometimes the very coal paste itself, now dried and hardened, but still chemically analyzable, can be found still inside its ancient container. Applicators made of organic materials like wood or ivory, which would have quickly perished and disintegrated in damper, less forgiving climates, are often found perfectly preserved, sometimes still bearing faint traces of the coal they last applied. This incredible level of survival allows modern scientists, as we've discussed in earlier sections, to perform detailed chemical analyses on the ancient coal, confirming the widespread use of galena and malachite, identifying the various oils and fats used as binders, and even revealing those intriguing trace lead salts that may have contributed to coal's ancient medicinal reputation. These tomb treasures, therefore, are so much more than just curious or beautiful relics. They are invaluable, direct windows into the daily lives, the cherished beliefs, and the funerary practices of the ancient Egyptians. They confirm for us the specific ingredients used in coal, sometimes allowing researchers to reconstruct ancient recipes with a surprising degree of accuracy. They showcase the evolution of artistic styles and craftsmanship in the tools themselves, the changing shapes of grinding palettes over the centuries, the popular decorative motifs on coal pots from different dynasties, the preferred materials for applicators in various periods. Sometimes, the way coal has been applied to the mummy itself, or to the anthropoid coffin, or the serene face of a funerary mask, can reflect contemporary styles of the living, providing a poignant snapshot of fashion and ideal appearance, frozen in time and intended for eternity. Above all, the sheer, consistent presence and often surprising quantity of these cosmetic items found in burials across the social spectrum underscore the profound and unwavering importance the Egyptians placed on coal for their safe journey through and successful existence in the afterlife. You know how you sometimes overpack for a simple week's holiday, throwing in extra outfits and toiletries just in case. Well, it seems some ancient Egyptians thoroughly overpacked for eternity. Better bring at least 5 coal pots and a spare applicator, darling. One can almost hear them thinking. One can never be too prepared or look too shabby when one is about to meet Anubis and the 42 divine assessors in the Hall of Truth. It's a well-established mainstream historical fact that ancient Egyptian tombs, ranging from the opulent, treasure-filled burials of pharaohs such as Tutankhamun, to the more modest, simple graves of common individuals, have frequently yielded quantities of coal, along with specialized coal containers, pots or tubes, slender applicators, grinding pallets, and other related cosmetic implements. This widespread and consistent inclusion of cosmetic equipment as essential grave goods powerfully underscores the ancient Egyptian belief that these items were absolutely vital for the deceased in the afterlife, necessary for ensuring clear vision in the spiritual realm, providing magical protection, maintaining their personal identity and status, and appearing appropriately and respectfully before the gods. For a quirky and rather charming tidbit, it's quite delightful when archaeologists discover what appears to be a complete, personal cosmetic set carefully placed within a tomb. Perhaps a favorite coal pot, its matching applicator still resting neatly beside it or even inside it. A small, worn grinding pallet still bearing faint pigment stains, and maybe even a polished bronze mirror, all lovingly arranged in a small wooden box or a woven reed basket. It's like uncovering a little ancient vanity case, packed with all the essentials for ensuring one looked one's best and felt thoroughly protected on the ultimate, unknown journey. Some coal pots have even been found with the coal almost entirely used up, suggesting it was a cherished personal item, used extensively throughout life, now faithfully accompanying its owner into death. A silent testament to daily rituals. Now, whether the specific coal recipes and the elaborate, often highly stylized application methods found in elite funerary contexts, such as those prepared for royalty or high nobility, were perfectly identical to those used in their daily life by those same individuals, or if there were perhaps special funerary-grade coal preparations with unique, perhaps more ritually pure ingredients, or even distinct ritualistic application methods specifically designated and consecrated for the deceased to enhance their passage, power, and perception in the afterlife, is a subtle but intriguing question that archaeologists, Egyptologists, and archaeochemists continue to investigate through meticulous analysis, textual research, and cross-comparison of funerary finds with any cosmetic-related discoveries from settlement sites. Were you buried with your everyday coal or your best meet the gods coal? The inclusion of coal in tombs wasn't just an afterthought, a casual tossing in of a few personal effects. It was a core considered part of ensuring the deceased was properly and fully equipped for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. It's somewhat like making absolutely sure your phone is fully charged and topped up with international data before you embark on a long and uncertain journey to a foreign land today. Except for the ancient Egyptians, their long and uncertain journey was eternity itself, and being fully charged and connected meant having enough coal to look fabulous, see clearly, and confidently fend off any lurking demons or spiritual dangers in the great, mysterious beyond. These tomb treasures, these carefully preserved coal pots and ancient, elegant applicators, are therefore so much more than just fascinating archaeological artifacts to be displayed behind glass in museums. They are intimate, tangible echoes of individual lives, poignant expressions of deeply held, enduring beliefs about life, death, and eternity, and silent, eloquent witnesses to the Egyptians' profound conviction that even in the embrace of death, the coal-lined eye remained a potent source of power, identity, beauty, and a vital connection to the eternal.